Good morning from Prague. Okay, good morning in Prague again, and good morning online also. I'm happy to have not only the speakers and also scholars here in Prague, but also online. We welcome at this very small workshop we organize within the project TRUEDEM. It's a Horizon Europe project, and the main investigator, Professor Christian Herper, will soon present the whole background of the project. I will use this opportunity in the next 3 till 5 minutes, not only to welcome you at the Metropolitan University Prague, but also on behalf of the rector of the university, Professor Michal Klima, to welcome you here and to say you a few words about the university. I have to apologize, Professor Klima. He would be interested in the issue. He is political scientist by profession, but we do have this very specific period that I would say we still do have preparatory week at the university, and we use our equipment to invite the high school students and present them the university. So recently in our main building in Strašnice, I was informed there are between 250 and 300 students from high schools, and Mr. Rector gives opening speech, and then he invites their teachers for coffee and cake. So on behalf of Mr. Rector, again, welcome in Prague, and welcome also to our colleagues who are online. The Metropolitan University Prague is one of the oldest private universities in Czech Republic, established in the year 2001. Recently, we do have approximately 3,000 students. I went through the statistic this morning, and we already have about 13,000 graduates from our university in these last 2 decades. Recently, we offer 25 study programs, 10 at BA level, 10 at MA level, and 5 PhD programs. Among these PhD programs, also political science taught in English and in Czech as well. And you are in our second building. It's the biggest building regarding the number of staff, a number of teaching rooms and so on, but still I would say the second one. This has to be stressed, but it is also the location of our Department of Political Science and Anglophone Studies. We are located in the 8th floor, and this is our small conference room where we organize such events like workshops, like the meeting of boards, and so on. So be welcome again, and I will give the floor and word to Professor Christian Herper.
Thank you very much. So this is the morning. I'm welcoming you on behalf of. I welcome you on behalf of our project. Our project is called TRUEDEM. It's an acronym for Trust in European Democracies. And here we have the honor to have several teams from this consortium amongst us. My name is Christian Herper. I know Professor Michal Klima from the 90s. We did studies together on transition of democracy. So I'm the director of the project and principal investigator. I'm also professor of political science at the University of Vienna. And we started this project recently. And my idea is to tell you what we are planning. So we are planning a 3-year project, which started now in 23 and will go on until 25. So we are producing work packages, altogether 12. Most of them are in research. So this is a research project, most of it. But we have also 2 packages on public policy. So our task is to advise politicians at the European level, national level, what can be done to stabilize trust, to regain trust, etc. And we have one work package on dissemination. So the event today is part of this work package, disseminating and communicating what we are doing. And one is about management. This is just how we hire people, our budgets, internal management structures. We have the magical figure of 12 teams from 12 countries. 12 is supposed to bring luck, and we have 11 EU member states, Czech Republic, Romania, Austria, etc. I will talk about it later. And Ukraine. Ukraine is also part of our consortium. Altogether, we have 60 researchers of all age groups and in our team. We try to have a gender balance in terms of female and male researchers. And altogether, about 60 researchers are working full-time or part-time. We have 44 deliverables. Deliverables are products. We have to deliver them. And amongst them, we have databases. 5 databases which are quantitative and 1 database which is qualitative. And we have research reports and other reports. 6 policy working papers and action plans. We develop education material sets. So you can see we are very busy. We have to do a lot of work in the next 3 years. There will be not much time to relax. And we are planning about 40 academic publications in journals and in books. We are an interdisciplinary team. Most of us are political scientists, political sociologists, but we have also invited people from psychology, public administration, cross-cultural studies, and more. So because there are many legal questions in trust, there are many psychological questions. That's why we put together a truly interdisciplinary team to answer all these questions. Who is our audience? Who are our target groups? Our target groups are policymakers at the national level, Czech policymakers, Austrian policymakers, Romanian policymakers, but also at the European level. So we will talk to members of the European Parliament, we will talk to the members of the European Commission, etc. So we are also talking to civil servants, people who are in administration, because they have to do all these things to increase trust. And we talk to civil society, we talk to social movements, civil society. And of course, we talk also with teachers and last but not least, with citizens per se. What are our objectives? There are many. We want to design and implement a research effort to collect perceptions of trust and also to check the trustworthiness of institutions. So we're not only talking about trust per se, but also if this trust is deserved. Because sometimes people are trusting an organization like a church without knowing exactly what is going on there, and then they are disappointed. So we have 2 aims. One is trust in general, and one is trustworthiness. And also we want to create a knowledge base. So at the end of our project, we'll have databases where people can go themselves and look at different aspects of trust and democracy. And we want to identify strategies to look at the demands of citizens. What are citizens wanting from us, wanting from the government, from parliament, legal system, to increase the trust in general. And then we want to look at clusters of values, which values are supporting trust, which values are decreasing trust. And finally, we want to develop a toolbox, a box of instruments for politicians, if something goes wrong in the legal system, media system, what can they do in order to stabilize the situation, in order to reduce the conflict, etc. So we are producing tools for politicians, and the politicians then can decide which tool they want to use or not. So we have, as you can see, two work packages which are empirical. These two work packages, one is about indicators and long-term trends of trust. So we develop a database of quantitative indicators for 40 years between 1980 and 2022. So we are covering 20 years. So these indicators will then show the long-term dynamics of trust and the regional dynamics of trust in Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, Western Europe, Northern Europe. So we develop huge databases, which are then available later for scientists and others to be used. Then another work package is about data collection. There we will make expert or elite interviews with policymakers, around 150 in many countries. Then we will also make interviews with leaders in civil society, also 150 approximately. Then we will have focus groups with citizens, about 6 focus groups, where we invite citizens to discuss what they think about trust, what they think is missing, etc. And another empirical data is we do a survey of citizens about trust. This survey will be online, and it will be done in 6 countries with a sample size altogether of about 9,000. And then we have research reports. The first one is about voting in elections. The second one is about socioeconomic transformation, reshaping democracies. The third one is about culture, about values. The fourth one is about cleavages, old cleavages, new cleavages, and political polarization. Then another work package is about social media and trust. What is the influence of Facebook and other social media on reducing trust or increasing trust? And then we will have a package about information, media use, and trust. And finally, on the right side, you can see we develop this toolbox for politicians with a different policy recommendation. Okay. Huh? It doesn't like it. It doesn't move. Okay, what is our timeline? Our timeline is, at the moment, we are in the inception period. We are start beginning, we start to think how we do it. So this inception period is the first stage. Then the next stage is building the evidence. The third stage is synthesis, bringing all things together. And then we have the toolbox, and finally, the final reports. As you can see, all these work packages have different time spans. 1, 2, 3, 5, 11, 12 are starting early, and the other ones come later. Okay, which methods are we using? We are using desk research, a review of the literature which we did, and on trust and trustworthiness. But we also collect documents from debates in parliament and national discourses on democracy. Then we have secondary analysis. We're using lots of databases, World Value Survey, European Value Survey, European Social Survey, to build up our databases on election, on trust, on voting. Then we will do, this is secondary research. And then we do primary research. We do this online quantitative survey with split sample experiments in France, Greece, Italy, Poland, Romania, and Sweden. So in this new survey, we try to measure trust and trustworthiness in an innovative and hopefully successful method. And then we have qualitative studies with experts and with leaders of NGOs. And then we have experiments where we observe the social media performance to see how they are influencing trust. And then we are doing analysis of policy to see which policies do we have at the national level, European level regarding trust. So we use also other methods like discourse analysis, content analysis, factor and cluster analysis, regression, multivariate statistics, mapping, and visualization. So it's more or less the whole encyclopedia of social science methods which we are applying in this project. So our results are, we want to have a robust and full database for 30 European countries, the 27 member states, plus Switzerland, plus Norway, plus United Kingdom. So we are doing a 30-country study. And then we are presenting a new revised theory of political trust, hopefully, which can explain more than previous theories of trust. This is our ambition. I hope we will succeed with this. And then we want to have new concepts, how to study elections, how to study identities, cultural values, etc. And then finally, we want to have databases on trust, elections, social identities, and media use. We also want to produce education materials for schools, for political science education in secondary schools, to give teachers there some interesting documents, what to do about trust, talking to teenagers and pupils in secondary education. And then we want to have this toolbox, which we want to provide to politicians, what to do if things goes wrong. And then we are providing policy briefs, very short documents, which sort of policies can be done, should not be done. And then we have audience meetings with citizens and others where we present our results in full details. So the impact is we hope that with our academic publications, we can start a new paradigm of political trust. We hope also that we can contribute to the revival of democratic governance. We hope also that we have an impact in government to influence the agenda of the European Union and national governments. And we want to create a bigger engagement of citizens and members of civil society in different forms of communication. So we want to influence national policy agendas, EU policy agendas, so we're very ambitious. We want to improve the tools for improvement of trust. We want to improve the scientific knowledge on trust. We want to expand the engagement of civil society actors in trust and democracy. And we want to raise awareness of citizens, what is the problem with trust and how we can solve it. And then we want to improve the civic education in secondary school. And finally, we want to contribute to the improvement of media communication on trust. So we have an email address, which you are invited to use. We have a website, we have a Facebook site, we have a Twitter site, we have electronic newsletter. We have podcasts in the future, not yet, but we will have also podcasts. And then we have TRUEDEM panels. At the moment, we had one in ECPR. We have it also in IPSA and in WEPA this year. Then we will create, under the leadership of the Romanian team, Observatory of Political Trust. And but Professor Tufis maybe also talks about this new observatory. Then we have workshops and webinars like today. This is we are part of number 9. And then we have panel discussion with experts on the website. Also, we have international advisory boards about scientific advisory board, policy advisory board, legal advisory board. And we are also meeting other teams who work on trust. So now I would like to present quickly our team. So as you can see, Metropolitan University in Prague is here, the leading organization on the globe, the European side. Then the German partner is the University of Leuphana in Germany. Then we have Sciences Po, University of Grenoble as the partner for France. Then we have University of Ljubljana representing Slovenia. Then we have the University of Salerno representing Italy. Then we have Picopan, which is a research center in Stockholm in Sweden. Then we have our team in Katowice, University of Katowice in Poland. Then we have a team in University of Kharkiv in Ukraine who work with us. Then we have a team in Bratislava, Comenius University. Then we have our team in Vienna, Eurasia Barometer Institute for Comparative Server Research. Then we have University of Bucharest, the team for Romania, the leaders here. And then finally, we have the University of Peloponnese, which is representing Greece. The PIs are myself and Pippa Norris from the Harvard University. Pippa Norris is one of the leading political scientists in the world, and she and I work together since years in the World Wide Survey. She is vice president and me is president. So we are the PIs. And then this is Metropolitan University. I don't know, Professor Chabada, if you want to add now here or later. So the Czech team is based here at Metropolitan University in Prague. Professor Chabada is Jean Monnet chair. He's also here in the meeting and has many research projects. He served as president of the Czech Political Science Association and of the Central European Political Science Association. So his team brings expertise in comparative politics of East Central Europe, party politics, electoral studies, etc. And the team leads package number 5, new identities and emerging cleavages, implications for political polarization. Then we have the team in France, which is led by Frédéric Gauthier. Frédéric Gauthier is the PI for France in the European Value Survey and also in the European Social Survey and in ISSP. Then we have the team from Germany, from Lüneburg, which is led by Professor Welzel. He's vice president of the World Value Survey. And then we have the team in Greece, Professor Sokratis Koniodos. He is a leading scientist on social capital and political capital. Then we have University of Salerno, Italy, which is led by Professor Madaloni. He is an expert on voting in Italy and in Europe on elections. The team in Poland is University of Silesia in Katowice, which is led by Professor Agnieszka Turska-Kawa. Then the team for Bucharest is here. The leader is Professor Claudio Tufis. He will talk in this workshop today. And they will, he's the leader of package number 1, indicators and long-term trends of political trust. Then the team from Slovakia is Comenius University in Bratislava. The team from Slovenia is University of Ljubljana. The team from Sweden is Values Research Institute in Stockholm. They will have a package on values, culture, trust, and democracy. The University of Kharkiv in Ukraine will also work with us in this project. We will not discuss democracy in Ukraine. This team is helping us in methodology and in social science, technology, and visualization. Okay, that's all from my point of view. Thank you very much. I will go back to the chair, and thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much, Professor Herper, for this insight into the project, and I would say that several colleagues are already familiar with the issue. Nevertheless, if you would like to raise some questions, comments, use this opportunity now or later. We can discuss it also during the coffee breaks and then beyond the conference. Okay, then thank you again, Professor Herper. I suggest that we continue based on our program. So I invite the first paper givers. These are colleagues from the Grenoble Alpes University, namely Florent Frasque and Stéphanie Abrial, who will present online. Is the only online presentation today. The colleagues were not able to come. And the title of their presentation is "Can Winners Be Sore Losers?" So Stéphanie, Florent, the floor is yours.
Okay, so first, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity today to present our work. And I am Stéphanie Abrial and Florent Frasque. They're from Grenoble Alpes University, and more precisely from the Social Sciences Research Center, PACT. And thank you very much of the organizer of the workshop for inviting us this morning to present a work in progress entitled "Can Winners Be Sore Losers?" So what is it about? Actually, political mistrust has long been regarded as a symptom of democratic crisis. Whether in France or anywhere else in Europe, the question of satisfaction with democracy is a key issue which has been measured from a long time by major international surveys. And we all know that satisfaction has radically dropped. This increase of dissatisfaction and the decline of people's trust in democracy establishment are considered as clues of the growing polarization between those who are satisfied with the current political system and those who are not satisfied with democracy. So in that context, the well-documented mechanism of sore losers has been used to explain the increase in political polarization after electing periods, highlighting how supporters of losing candidates declare greater disappointment after the elections. In that way, identify in majority systems during the most important elections, a winner-loser gap in democratic satisfaction is gradually being recognized in various contexts. This gap is growing after each election because winners will tend to be even more satisfied and losers even less. However, after the 2022 French presidential election, we detect in our panelized quantitative survey a trend of winners acting like sore losers. First-round voters of Emmanuel Macron declare on average lesser satisfaction in democracy and despite their electoral victory.
Indeed, the average level drops from 2.89 to 2.74 on a satisfaction scale running from 1 to 4, 4 meaning that people are very satisfied. And at the individual level, they're stating less satisfaction after election affects around 28% of Macron's voters in our panel. So the question is, how can winners be sore losers?
And while this phenomenon Sorry.
This situation could be read as an aggravation of democratic depression, because in addition to some losers criticizing democracy, some winners are reacting the same way, increasing so the total number of mistrusters. Nevertheless, our communication aims to reverse the interpretation of political mistrust as a proof of the decline in citizens' democratic aspirations. Rather than a sign of a worsening democratic crisis, we argue that this paradoxical situation reveals a different phenomenon, the enhancement and the sophistication of citizens' democratic demands.
And while this phenomenon of sore loser is mainly dealt with quantitative data, we decided to use a mixed method approach. That is, on the quantitative side, we used data from the French Electoral Survey 2022. That is a panelized survey including 3 waves. The first was carried out 6 months before the election, the second 3 months before the election, and the last one just a few days after the second round of the French presidential election. The questionnaires included the question that asked respondents to judge how runs the French democracy. So this has given us the opportunity to follow the evolution of the democratic satisfaction index. And the sociological and political data were collected on each participant to build a winner sore loser profile and to compare it with classic sore losers and with other Macron's electors who do not act as sore loser. On the qualitative side, we used data from a French survey called Formation du Jugement Politique, that is political judgment making, which is carried out over 4 waves, one before each first round of the presidential election in 2007, 2012, 2017, and the last one, 2022. To date, 160 semi-structured interviews have been carried out on questions of opinion and politicization, with a specific reminder on democracy, with the question, when we mention the word democracy, what does that make you think? Is democracy important for you? At what point is this important for you? Okay. So let's have a look now to the qualitative data at what the respondents had to say about democracy in France and how from one period to the next, profound changes reveal an increase in the democratic demands of French citizens. We carried out a systematic analysis using automatic queries with the NVivo software. So in 2007, we get a discourses of attachment and instrumental valorization of democracy. Democracy, for now, we could not find better. Le Pen, it is still democratic to let him run for the presidential election. We must be able to control the people we mandate. And I find it normal to elect a president by universal suffrage. In 2012, we get a discourse that would like the system to go further, to take everyone's voice into account, specifically in a time where fears and anxieties are on the rise. I played the democratic game and I hope it won't be too much a disaster. 2017 was the year in which people began to express higher expectations and demands of the political system, to have more debates, to hear contradiction, to avoid excesses, to allow all opinions to be expressed. In short, the French citizens are becoming more demanding and they are less passive and they want to be more involved, not being cut off from our reality. I think it's a good time to take the opposition into account and even better to bring more debates. It should be necessary to develop a stronger opposition. There should be other voices heard. And remember that 2018, the Yellow Vest movement forcefully marked this turning point in the expressed democratic needs. The year 2022 will reinforce this trend. The system which consists in giving one's opinion just at the elections, bah, that's not really democracy. French citizen discourses are moving up a gear in terms of democratic demands. It's not longer enough to go out and vote and take part in elections. It's not enough. People want more. At the same time, however, we are seeing the emergence of references to more verticality and authorities. Democracy means rights and duties for citizens. This emphasis on authorities as a prerequisite for democracy is quite new and raises a number of questions. Participating in election is not really what I call democracy. What I regret is that we are never sufficiently consulted after the elections. I think citizens' initiative referendum is a good step forward. There are a lot of people who forget that that is a democracy, a set of rights and duty. And the problem is that we are not united enough to do that. There would be more democracy in Ukraine and in a united people where the president stays to fight. But guys like that, who are prepared to risk their lives to the bitter end for their country? Well, I don't think we have many of them in France. So in 2022, three categories of the discourses on democracy will emerge. First, instrumental, that is, election is a tool offered by democracy to help candidates to support you to win. Second, procedural, that is, election as a democratic test to see whether the fundamental mechanisms of democracy are being properly respected. And in that way, the focus is on the conduct of electoral processes like pluralism, adversarial debates, freedom of expression, etc. So symbolic, that elections have an opportunity to show that your personal convictions are important enough to be shared by a large number of other people. Regardless of the electoral outcome, this symbolic function consists of hoping that your own opinions and your values really matter.
As we said, thanks to our quantitative survey, we can observe the evolution of an average democratic satisfaction index all along the electoral period for each electorate. As the figure shows, electors of Emmanuel Macron, the winner of the election, declare lesser satisfaction after the victory than during the campaign. We therefore do have graceful winners and winners sore losers among them. Then we also observe classic sore losers, electors of Valérie Pécresse, the traditional white governmental party candidate, and voters of Yannick Jadot, the center-left ecologist party candidate, respectively 5th and 6th in the election, declare lesser satisfaction as the campaign progresses and even more after the election. Finally, electors of Marine Le Pen, the traditional far-right party candidate, finishing 2nd and hitting his best record ever at the 2nd round, electors of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the candidate of a young far-left formation, 3rd in the election and getting his best record ever, and electors of Éric Zemmour, the candidate of a recently born far-right party, getting more than 7% of the voices for his first election, declare all, on average, greater democratic satisfaction after the verdict than during the campaign. Within these three more radical electorates, we therefore are graceful losers and even happy losers, but we'll leave this interesting result for later studies. Now, using our pre-electoral interviews with Macron's voters, we will try to understand winners' disappointments. In parallel, using the quantitative data, we will discern the sociological and political profile of winners or losers from classic or losers in the first time, and then from graceful Macron's electors. Extensive literature explains how electoral disappointments can translate into negative judgment about democracy. For classic or losers, we easily understand they could be disappointed on all the three dimensions evoked by Stephanie before: procedural, symbolic, and instrumental. But winning candidate partisans' disappointments can hardly be linked to instrumental expectations. So what were the procedural and symbolic expectations of Macron's electors which would not have been fulfilled and which explain the existence of winners or losers? Among all potential electors of Emmanuel Macron interviewed before the first round, one main expectation stands out, sometimes expressed clearly and more often as a fear. Macron's electors are afraid by progress of candidates they consider extremists. Consequently, they hope on a symbolic level that the election will allow French people to send an unclouded message, rejection message to far-right and far-left candidates. The symbolic strength of this message depends also on the participation rate. To be blunt, this message must be sent by a large majority. So on a procedural level, they therefore would like a low level of abstention. Macron's voters want to win, but most importantly, to win with a big gap with the radical candidates and a high level of participation. The final abstention rate and the smaller gap ever with a far-right candidate at the second round therefore disappointed Macron's voters. So, considering procedural and symbolic expectations, and not only the instrumental ones, it becomes easier to understand the winner's dissatisfaction. Now, what about the sociopolitical profile of the winners acting as sole loser? To answer this question, we use again our quantitative data to segregate and compare, in the first time, winners or losers from classic sole losers, and in the second time, from other electors of Emmanuel Macron. Even if our dataset is far from ideal and the method used certainly perfectible, these first tests give us additional clues to understand the phenomenon of winners acting as sole losers and reinforce the theoretical proposal we will support in conclusion. First, we see that winners or losers are not very distinct from classic sole losers on the sociological level. There's no significant difference in age, degree level, sex, life place, and neither in political self-positioning. Winners or losers are just statistically less afraid by Islam, less precarious, and more satisfied with Macron's work than classic sole losers, which seems to rather be a general trend of Macron's electorate compared to others. This result leads us to assert that a similar phenomenon affects winners and losers who are disappointed after election, and that we must extend the notion of sole losers to certain winners and not to construct a new concept. Now, what distinguishes winners, sole losers, and other voters of Emmanuel Macron? We discern four significant and interesting differences. Winners, sole losers are statistically younger, less afraid by Islam, further left positioned, and more satisfied by Macron's work than other electors of Emmanuel Macron. These results confirm our main explanation of supporters of the winning candidate acting as sole loser. For these individuals, winning is no longer enough to be satisfied with democracy. They think they should have won more widely, either because they are convinced that Macron is brilliant, either because they look far-right as horrible, or because both reasons. Their dissatisfaction is so explained by disappointed symbolic expectation. To conclude, the first phase of the winner-loser gap theory, already mentioned by other works, is to infer a dichotomic view of electoral results. But to lose or to win does not mean the same thing for each political formation. It depends on the previous results of the party and on its challenging the system characteristic. for the more radical parties to get parliamentary representation can be seen as a victory. Consequently, in a parliamentarian systems, for instance, it seems suitable to consider defeat or victory by judging the evolution of the number of seats of the party. In addition to different meanings of victory and defeat, our contribution shows that the individual satisfaction with election is not only determined by winning or losing, but also by assessing the achievement of own procedural and symbolic expectations that could be exceedingly sophisticated and occasionally contradictory. The second problem concerns the requirement to distinguish among each electorate sore losers from graceful ones. To meet this challenge, some scholars proved that individual democratic satisfaction is an electoral subjective satisfaction function. Identifying instrumental, procedural, and symbolic expectations, then converted to disappointments, our work contributes to clarify what is behind this subjective satisfaction. 15 years ago, Blais and Gélineau proposed to explore how expectations about the outcome of the election affect the way individuals evaluate the democratic process. Taking support on our research, we suggest rephrasing this conclusion, defending that diversified expectations about the outcome and the unfolding of the election affect the way individuals evaluate the democratic process. We are conceptualizing sore losers, taking into account complexity of citizens' democratic and electoral aspirations, allows us to explain how certain winners can be sore losers. Because it highlights this paradoxical situation, the 2022 French electoral sequence, analyzed with mixed methods, is an excellent negative case or limit case to rebuild sore losers theory. Indeed, the partisan realignment context, characterized by the tripolarization of the French political system and marked by the emergence of new political parties and the fall of all governmental parties, offers ideal conditions to roll away from a dichotomic view of winners and losers. Finally, if our case was perfectly appropriate, our surveys were not designed to investigate sore-loser questions. This question comes from a work led by Stephanie and me in the context of collective, forthcoming collective book. So this work calls to be completed by other cases with better methodological designs. On the qualitative side, we argue that it is essential to carry out pre-electoral interviews and post-electoral interviews with all respondents. On the quantitative side, we claim for a more precise measure of individuals' previsions about results before the elections in terms of seats or persons of votes in order to consider the gap between their expectations and the results. Above all, and we think it is a big challenge, we argue it would be desirable that quantitative surveys try to gauge procedural and symbolic expectations too. Thank you for your attention, and we are hoping your questions.
Thank you, thank you very much, Florent and Stephanie, for your interesting presentation. And I assume and I suggest that after each presentation, we will open immediately the discussion. So having here the group of scholars, I'm asking if you would like to comment or if you would like to ask some question to our colleagues from Grenoble. Okay, Claudio.
Hey, thank you very much for a very interesting paper. I think to me the most important result from what you presented so far is the one that basically says that supporters of Macron did not really feel that it is enough for them just to win, but they wanted to actually beat the opposition, and they were disappointed by the fact that they did not manage to get their validation in this way. So I think that's actually a very interesting result. I'm really glad that you have this type of data that allows you to go into this much detail in trying to figure out exactly where where it comes from, these winners behaving as sore losers. And I hope you will go ahead with it, because I think there is really a lot of space to develop the literature from this perspective, because as you've identified in your lit review, so far people were usually looking just at supporters of the winning side and supporters of the losing side, but actually there's more to it. So I'm really glad that somebody is doing this. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much.
Okay, it was only recommendation or just a comment. Any other questions, comments, feedback? If not, Stephanie, Florian, once again, merci for your presentation. Thank you for being with us. And I will open the floor for the next presentation, which will be given by Jan Kotynek-Krotky, who is the postdoctoral researcher or postdoctoral fellow at the University of Wrocław. He graduated from the Masaryk University in Brno, as I recognize in the short talk with him. And the colleague Kotynek-Krotky will present the paper with the title, "You know, this conference has no legitimacy, the Eurosceptic contestation of the COFOE." So the floor is yours. Me neither.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to listen such great project, broad project, and interesting results of the previous presentation. Can you hear me? Yeah. Good. So thank you for invitation, and thank you for introducing myself. My name is Jan Kotynek-Krotky, and yeah, my presentation is part of the broader project called INPACO, in which with the leader of the project, Karolina Hryzniewska-Borońska, we focus on potential of interparliamentary cooperation. Although my presentation is, and my paper, future paper, is not entirely about trust. I don't know whether I should, yeah, I will be here. It's not about trust. I truly believe that it's part of the story. It's part of the story, as you will see, I hope, and I think it's related to working package number 5. So my concept with which I'm working right now is Euroscepticism, and I don't work with the old concept, with the division on hard and soft Euroscepticism anymore. I don't think it's I don't believe it's valid anymore after Brexit and after war in Ukraine. We don't see hard Eurosceptics in reality, or there are some, of course, but it's not so vivid, I would say. Nobody, or there is no vivid actions to leave the EU, to have Czechit, or I don't know, Polexit, and so on. So I work with the conceptualization which says that Euroscepticism is political contestation, element of political discourse on European integration based on propositions and arguments that contest the legitimacy of European integration or the EU. Euroscepticism has become normal in the EU, and especially in the European Parliament. You can see that in 2009 there was 20% of seats allocated to Eurosceptics, and today it's 28%, so much more than before. Eurosceptic contestation is highest in policy areas touching on distributive, constituent, and cultural issues. So it can be detected with help of Galtan cleavage. So Euroscepticism is part of this cleavage. However, such strong contestation polarization have relatively low effects on voting behavior of the European political groups in the European Parliament. So we can see that right-wing or some MEPs moved their discourse towards the Eurosceptic voices a bit. Yeah, there is some research about it, but in the voting behavior, they still establish, or mainstream political groups, they still establish cordon sanitaire, which means to exclude Eurosceptic and populist from the decision making, from participation in committees and so on. So cordon sanitaire is still common in the European Parliament. So, and that's my conceptualization, my conceptual framework of this presentation of this work. And I applied this frame on Conference on the Future of Europe, which represent the constituent area in which Eurosceptic constitution is expected and should be observed or could be observed, because, yeah, as I explained before, Conference on the Future of Europe, or COFFE, depends how you call it, is a novel deliberative approach to the functioning of the EU by enhancing the civic participation proposed by Emmanuel Macron and further embraced by Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. As I heard previous presentation, I will try to make linkages to what you are focusing on. So I believe that deliberative exercises in Europe and in the European Parliament try to somehow break the gap, try to be closer to citizens who are dissatisfied with European democracy, for example. This conference took 1 year from May 2019 to May 2020, and it was constructed through multilingual digital platform, then through citizens deliberation within European citizens panels, and through conference plenary. So that was the three main platforms in which this deliberative exercise took part. And final report consists of 49 proposals, final report of this conference, which some of them required a treaty change. And one of my previous paper argues that the treaty change wasn't actual result of this conference, but it was promoted in the beginning by mainstream political groups. And the European Parliament, as the European Parliament called on EU member states to set up a convention to revise the treaties. But it wasn't the European Parliament as a whole institution, but only pro-European political groups. And as I mentioned, it's common to establish cordon sanitaire, and it was also in this conference, during the preparation of this conference. The European Parliament tried to claim the ownership over the conference. It was the first institution who set up the resolution, prepared the resolution, signed by all pro-European groups, plus by the left, which is the soft Eurosceptic group criticizing neoliberal policies. However, the right-wing Eurosceptic political groups were excluded, actually. They weren't invited to the talks to prepare the resolution, to talk about how the conference should look like. And they prepared their own motions for resolutions. And from the literature, we know that it was mainly the three biggest pro-European political groups who shaped the agenda and debates of the conference: socialists and reformists, socialists, Renew Europe, and European People's Party. And my question is, what was the Eurosceptic positions of over the COFE? Is the cordon sanitaire reasonable and efficient in unconsolidated polity? I don't talk about policies like migration. I'm talking about polity issues. And I analyzed several documents, mainly motions for resolutions, plenary debates, and also web documents of right-wing political groups. I focus on delegitimization strategies proposed by ECR and ID. ECR, which is shortcut for or abbreviation for European Conservatives and Reformists, and ID is Identity and Democracy. And I found three common strategies by which they criticized the conference, the preparation of the conference. The first strategy was that conference started with a predetermined outcome. The second strategy is that the conference was biased by representation. And the third strategy, the third strategy means that the conference didn't bring any attention. And I will go briefly through these three strategies. So the predetermined outcome, what does it mean? It means that ECR and ID both, they said that the conference was led by top-down method. It was led by Euro bureaucrats, we can say, by European bubbles, and who tried to move conference towards the centralized, ever-close union way. Why this? I didn't mention why these three objections are important. I'm going back a bit, because these three objections are very serious, because we are talking about deliberative exercise in which citizens should take part, and they touch upon the building grounds of deliberative exercise, and criticize these building grounds, And then I looked for literature which was just published a few months ago or in the last year, and that literature tried to evaluate the conference. And we can see that from the literature, from academics, scholars, that they said similar things. Yes, the process, the conference was started from the top down and suffered from a lack of transparency and citizens' input in the organization. Indeed, in my further work, I found that in the resolutions proposed by mainstream political groups, they proposed proposals which are going in more Europeanized way, such as Spitzenkandidaten, which is leading system during the elections to European Parliament, or transnational list. And also, as I mentioned before, from the beginning, they wanted treaty change. The second strategy, representation bias. So very often ECR members and ID members mention that the conference is represented and attended by people who are pro-European, who have high university degrees, who are the youngsters. And we know from the surveys that the youth is very pro-European compared to other generations. So they said that a conference was biased towards more European integration, and the conference was attended by unrepresentative group of citizens. And yeah, as you can see, again, scholars kind of confirm this strategy, this delegitimization strategy. They say, yeah, the selection of participants, there was no weight to political orientation or attitudes towards the EU. Another scholar says, Ollard says that a majority of platform participants have tertiary education. So again, there is some linkage between the criticism. The third strategy, lack of public and media attention. I wouldn't be surprised if you all who are interested in politics didn't hear about the conference. I wouldn't be surprised at all. And that was also mentioned by ECR. There was no European public availability, little attention from national media. And again, the scholar says the same. Conference has no been set up to attract public attention. If there was something that was fallen short, it has been their ability to elicit media attention. So I'm getting to the conclusion. First of all, the cordon sanitaire, I argue, is not effective since the Euroscepticism was consolidated in the EPI anyway. Mainstream pro-European groups tried to exclude them. They didn't invite them to the work, but still their percentage there in the European Parliament just rised during at the time. Then Eurosceptic groups might incorporate this strategy, like the cordon sanitaire, I mean, into their populist narrative about established parties forming the elite cartel to help each other hold on the power. And then that's we can see on the Twitter or on some social media that they say, okay, that's elites who govern the EU and they don't invite us to work with them. Third point, touch upon what I was talking about before. The strategies constructed or the criticism constructed by ECR and ID, also driven by their ideological stances, Euroscepticism, were quite substantive and I would say even constructive, and were reflected in later objections from academics. I also argue that Euroscepticism as a form of the constructive criticism might be even helpful in the polity issues, in the EU polity issues, because EU is not, European Union is not consolidated polity. It's still some let's say, project which is moving further, developing, and it needs some criticism. And which can be helpful for the groups who are leading, who are in the let's say in the Commission or in the European Parliament. And the last point is that the cordon sanitaire is therefore not only ineffective, reinforcing polarization in society, but also leading to disregard for possible pitfalls and mindless focus on the paths laid out, what I wanted to show before. And that's the end of my short presentation. And maybe a question for you, because it's, as I said, I think it's related to your project. So my question for you for the future, I don't know, would be, how would enhanced cooperation of the polarized political sphere following suggestion of consensus democracy impact the public trust in politics? Would it help? Yeah, that's my provocative question, and I think also the presentation was quite provocative because I'm not a fan of Eurosceptic ideas, but I think it's important to analyze it from from objective, so trying to analyze it from objective side. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I open the floor for the discussion. If you don't mind, I will have a first comment. If you don't mind, you mentioned that you studied by Professor Kaniok, and he wrote an excellent dissertation, unpublished, where he tried to make the classification, I would say, more clarified regarding this Euro-optimist and Euro-skeptic tendencies. So, by the way, he included also the third category, and he using these labels: Euro-optimist, Euro-realist, and Euro-negativist. So I wonder if you could a little bit discuss this issue, because you also use these terms like such as Eurosceptic. Who decided that I'm Eurosceptic? Is it what type of label is it? Is it heterostereotype, autostereotype, and so on? Secondly, of course, who decided that Euro-optimism should be the mainstream, and everyone who is not in the mainstream is Euro-negativist or Eurosceptic? I specifically stress that as I was a student in the beginning of 1990s, there were two big paradigms: intergovernmentalism and supranationalism. And continually, I would say that this first paradigm, labeled as intergovernmentalism, it was transformed into the Eurosceptic. But it's a label from outside, so out-group, not in-group evaluation and terms. So I wonder, in this sense, how I would say, you mentioned it is top-down. So it was this conference was provoked from the European level, from the European institutions. How these, I would say, authors of this whole project work with the term Eurosceptic, if they use it, and how they use it. You mentioned the cordon sanitaire. So in this sense, they would use it in negative sense, that there should be distance to these political actors. On the other side, you raised the question about the consensus. How to develop the consensual way of politics if we do not speak with the opposition in that way? So this is my maybe very complicated question or comment and question, but I would say that exactly workshop, the group of small group of people, opens the floor for such type of discussion also about this, I would say, more nuanced and profound issues.
Very good comments and questions. Thank you for that. I don't know if I will remember all of them, but I will try to. Should I have it? Okay. So who decide that there are mainstream political groups? Like from my conceptualization, operation, I took it as granted. I took it as granted because those political groups are leading in the European Parliament. They build coalition in the European Parliament. So yeah, I took it as granted. But they maybe in the future, and I think that's another reason why this project or this research is important in the future. It can happen that they will not be mainstream anymore because Euroscepticism is growing, is increasing, and yeah, and here we are touching upon the concept of Euroscepticism. Euroscepticism or Eurocriticism. So does it mean that also Verhofstadt is Eurosceptic? That's a provocative question, because he always criticized the European Parliament, but in another way, in the way that it's not effective and we should be more federalized, more, the European institutions should have more powers. So I think you said a very good idea that we should not only work with the critical voices on like Eurosceptics, but also with the other pole, those who criticizing from let's say from the pole to have more powers, to give more powers to European Parliament. and that intergovernmental is that it's more like it's moved from you said that intergovernmental ideas moved to Euroscepticism. Yeah, I think that in my paper I should more focus on that, because I actually I don't like this label Euroscepticism. And I think we should be more narrow, as my supervisor was, and maybe even more. And I think it also this concept of Euroscepticism depends on the context, and the context in the European Parliament is totally different from national member states. I think in the European Parliament they don't talk about the exit anymore. They are very Eurosceptics, or whatever we will call them. They want to somehow be involved. At least that's my impression. They are in the European Parliament, which is very technocratic institutions which try to make legislation. They want to be in legislation, yeah, but they are not, because there is this cordon sanitaire. I think this cordon sanitaire, the exclusion in the European Parliament, is not a very good, like from normative stand, is not a very good idea, because then it will be just one way of going for the European Union. And then, as I said in the conclusion, citizens might be dissatisfied with this, that you know, it's led only by pro-European groups and so on. I'm a bit lost. Sorry for that. Maybe if you want to ask once again, I would like to be. I will try to answer one more.
Thank you. I would say that you gave the answer, no? But your considerations show that it's difficult topic. It's really difficult topic, and I would say that definitely this is the problem. Firstly, how to create any type of opposition at the European level. No? There is a so-called government and a governmental or pro-commission majority in the European Parliament, but the opposition is usually framed with such labels that are strange. Too progressivist, too Eurosceptic, too Eurorealist, but not with us. And I would say this is the source of polarization in that way. And you mentioned that, right? It strengthened the polarization. And the second issue is this discussion, if we can also may implement some pullback effect, not only forward, but also maybe think about the return to the previous stage. This happens sometimes. For example, in tax policies, we know it from the COVID period. We changed a lot during the COVID period, and now we return to the normal times. If you look on the debate about taxes in Czech Republic, it's a very typical pushback effect in that way. So maybe this is also one of the impulses, but this would be not, I would say, provoked, positively provoked within such a conference.
Yeah, definitely. You are totally right. It won't be provoked by in the conference because it was led by pro-European groups. And yeah, I'm not. It should be considered. It should be considered. There is no one way, single way how to go forward. And that's the aim of my. I think that's my main argument of my presentation. There is no single way, and we should also listen. The opposition, the skeptic voices, or whatever we will call them. And one more maybe comment or yeah, for the future. I was talking about exclusion of opposition in the European Parliament, that they were excluded by pro-European political groups, but we don't know yet whether this exclusion was not self-exclusion. do they want to cooperate with mainstream political groups? You know, it's not only one side dimension. The problem might be on the both sides, and I believe it is. And I believe that the final question in the presentation behind this suggestion of consensus democracy can be helpful in that conflict.
Okay, thank you. My last comment on that, we do have enough analysis showing that the opposition in European Parliament cooperates much more with the government than in the majority of national parliaments. So if you look into the analysis of voting, specifically the European Reformist Group and the Progressive Left are those groups who really quite often support the majority within the parliament in their the first regarding the foreign policy, the second regarding something that is called green policy. I wonder if anyone else, anybody would like to raise any question. Claudio.
Yes, just because it's really an important topic, I just want to give you some very brief information about the Romanian case, and maybe you will find it useful and look into it, and it will help you probably develop this. So right now we are 1 year before the European Parliament elections, and we do have one political party which managed to enter 3 years ago into national parliament on the 4th position, newly created. Nobody knew, well, nobody who was not paying attention to the surveys. People really did not know, and it was a surprise for them to find a newly created party enter on the 4th position in the parliament. It's an ultra-nationalistic party, populist, Eurosceptic, so it has all of these traits. Nowadays, so 3 years into their mandate, it's called the Alliance for the Union of Romanians. So you can see it into their name that it's a nationalistic party. So nowadays, 3 years after being in parliament and 1 year before the European Parliament elections, the surveys, the polls are putting them maybe the first position, certainly the second position in the intention of voting. So they managed to gather a lot of support, even though they have been ignored into the parliament. They have been pushed aside. They were not given important positions. So the cordon sanitaire worked in the Romanian parliament as well. But the consequence was exactly what you were asking a few minutes ago. Do they really want to cooperate or not with the main parties? They did not. They used that to their advantage as a strategy to increase their support. So nowadays they've gotten to the point where if you have 30% of the intention of vote, 25% of the vote intention, you can't really ignore them, because by ignoring them, you're ignoring 25% of the people who are saying that they want to vote. And that is going to affect trust in institutions, trust in the system, everything. So that is a very interesting example, in my opinion, of how ignoring a problem does not really make the problem go away. It will just accentuate it and make it even bigger. So it's something that you should look into, I suppose, if you want to have a national case in your analysis as well. But otherwise, it's really interesting the way you structured your paper.
Thank you, Claudio. Thank you, Jan. It was very, very interesting. And then we all are also European citizens, and we also perceive these issues, I would say, very sensitively in many ways. And I will open the floor for the next presentation given by Claudio Tufis from the University of Bucharest, member of our TRUEDEM project team. Meanwhile, I would like to stress that we do have coffee, we do have cakes, and so on. Just serve yourself. For those who are online, I'm sorry, I cannot offer it also for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ladislav. So this is a presentation that is a little bit more related to a sort of literature review. But it's different from the usual literature reviews, because it's a literature review, a quantitative literature review. So rather than reading the papers and summarizing, this is something that was already been done. And we have a first report that was published by Pippa Norris as part of this work package. What I'm doing is I'm looking at a large number of articles that have been published on the issue of trust, trying to figure out what is it that we can understand, gather from these articles. So it's a quantitative review of the trust literature. Actually, we have data from 1965 to 2023, so it covers quite a lot of data. Thank you, Ksenia. So I will go into it. How did I create the data set? So I'm going to present it step by step. Maybe somebody will want to replicate or to use this particular procedure for some other from some other analysis. I used two of the most important indexing services that we have in the social sciences. It's the Web of Science, currently produced by Clarivate Analytics, and the second one is Scopus. And I selected from these two indexing services all of the articles that included anywhere in the fields that they have indexed: title, abstract, keywords, so on and so forth, a number of keywords: social trust, political trust, institutional trust, interpersonal trust, generalized trust, or generalized trust with being British and American spelling. So from the Web of Science, I managed to collect about 8,600 articles. I did a similar query on Scopus, and the result on Scopus was phenomenal. I got 56,000 articles. Now, that happened because actually there's a lesson to be learned here. It's not good to query in all of the fields on Scopus, because Scopus includes in these fields the references. So what happened, it found 56,000 articles that either were on trust or they cited the paper that was on trust. So the idea is then that's a lesson to be learned. Whenever you're using Scopus and trying to extract these, it's better to focus on title, abstract, and keywords rather than, or just exclude the references field from this. Because the result of this was that once I collected the data, I had to actually do an extra step of cleaning the data and getting rid of those that actually just cited papers on trust and were not necessarily papers written on the issue of trust. So that's a lesson to be learning here. So the next part was cleaning the data set. So as I said, 8,600 papers from Web of Science, 56,000 from Scopus. I had to eliminate the duplicate entries. I identified them by DOI first, and for those that did not have DOI, I also compared by title. I renamed some of the document types that were preceding papers, early access, so on and so forth. I just coded them as article, and I eliminated a number of document types that were not relevant for my interest: biographical notes, book reviews, editorial letters, meeting abstracts, so on and so forth. And I kept only the unique entries. So the first step of cleaning the data set resulted from 56 plus 8, 64,000 articles to 46,000 articles. The next step, I wanted to use ChatGPT to read the abstracts of all these articles and code based on the abstracts a number of variables. And I did that. Now, I excluded a number of cases that for various reasons did not work out with GPT. So some cases could not be processed by ChatGPT, mostly because of internet connection errors or timeouts in accessing the API. But those were just a small number of cases, 221. I also excluded the cases that had no abstracts, because the abstracts were the main text that was going to be coded by ChatGPT. I excluded those cases where ChatGPT basically did not do a very good job. But again, it's a very small proportion of cases. It's 396 cases out of 46,000. So it's less than 1%. I also dropped books and book chapters. I wanted to focus only on articles. So basically, I ended up, after doing this second step of cleaning, with 39,750 cases, basically articles, most of them, all of them. And finally, the third part of the cleaning, which I had to do because I had these extra articles that have been extracted from Scopus, that were not actually papers on trust, but that cited papers that included trust in their titles, I had to go through the keywords, title, and abstract and look for trust or confidence and keep only those articles. So finally, after 3 steps of cleaning, I ended up with a data set of 19,265 cases that are actually papers on trust. Now, as you will see later, when I finish my presentation, that doesn't mean that all of them are papers on institutional trust or the kind of trust that is important for us. But again, this is in a way the general population of articles, and I'm pretty sure that I did a good job at trying to be as inclusive as possible. It's not only papers work published in English, there's also a number of German, French, Spanish journals that are indexed. If they have the text in English, or if they have an abstract in English, it's included into the data set as well. So these were the cleaning steps. And once they were done, these are the variables that I do have in the data set. So when I extracted the data, I extracted also all the metadata that is available in Scopus and Web of Science. So I have data source, whether it was Web of Science or Scopus, publication year, the journal title, so identification data for the journal, for the publisher, the article title, article pages, which I have this information only for 79% of the cases. There are articles that are published in online journals and they don't have pages, start page, end page, so that you could compute data. I have data on authors, the number of authors for each paper, also their names, and also in about 89% of the cases, their research ID or their ORC ID, which is very useful because in one of the future steps, that will allow me to create network analysis and citation networks and so on and so forth, authorship networks. Keywords, they are available in about 93% of the cases. Abstracts, by definition, because I dropped cases that did not have abstract, it's full coverage. And then references and citations, it's the number of references they have in each paper and the number of citations for the papers. References, it's only for 1/3 of the data. It's coming mostly from Web of Science indexed articles. And citations, I have the number of citations for 90% of the articles into the data set. So there is a lot of data that will be useful for those who want to analyze more the literature on trust. Now, as I said, I was really curious to see how ChatGPT can be used in order to automatize this, because I don't have the time to read 20,000 abstracts, right? So you need to prompt ChatGPT. How it works, you need to pay them to give you access to the API. And so on and so forth. At the time I was doing this, I had access to version 3.5 of ChatGPT. Nowadays, you have already access to version 4, which is supposed to work better. So in the future, I might want to redo this just to figure out if it extracts more information. And you need to give a prompt. And the prompt was, I told ChatGPT that you are acting as a political science researcher that is going to do literature review. You have to be very detailed and very exact in what you're asking it to do. So I told it, so that's my visualization of ChatGPT. I told it, read the abstract. After you read it, identify information about a number of variables, and you'll see the variables, and then write your results. And I told it the format that I want the results to be published so that I can then use it. And I also stressed out that, given that ChatGPT sometimes likes to write things in excess, that it's not supposed to write anything else but the things that I'm asking it to write. So I was able then to extract 12 additional variables based on the abstracts into the data set. So the first one, V01, it's supposed to be a variable where it shows me if, just 1 second to drop this from here. If the variable that is being used in the analysis, it's social trust, interpersonal trust, institutional trust, so on and so forth. So it was able to code this for about 79% of the articles based on the abstracts, which is a very good percentage of success. Another variable, I asked it to identify whether the trust is used as a dependent variable or an independent variable into the article in the analysis. And then I asked about countries or regions in which the study was conducted, the time period where that was used in the analysis, the data set that was used in the analysis. I also asked for a list of dependent variables, a list of independent variables, a list of control variables, theories that have been named in the abstract, methodologies, methods, statistical models, and the sample size. Now, all of these, of course, we can't take them for granted. We need to double check them with human coding. And I managed to do this only for part of these variables. I worked on this over the holiday, and students do not really like to work during the holidays. So now that we start school in October again, I will be able to ask some students to help me with this. So that is the types of variables that we do have now in the data set, and that can be used after we verify them. Just to make a comparison in terms of the resources that are needed, I estimated that for a regular person to read an abstract of about 250 words and to code 12 variables would take at a minimum of 5 minutes, which would translate in about 10.4 person months of work. Which at a minimum wage in Romania, that would make it about 6,000 euros, the cost. The cost by using ChatGPT was in terms of time about 5 days, but again, you can reduce this if you use multiple computers or multiple cores, and it cost me only about 120 euros to pay for accessing ChatGPT for the time to use it. So overall, it did the coding in 2.5% of the time that would have been needed with human coders and at 2% of the cost. Of course, that's still to be done. I need to assess the quality of ChatGPT coding for all of the variables. For the variables that I checked myself, it's okay, it works very well, but these were kind of easy variables. When we get into identifying theories and methodologies, it might be a little bit more problematic. So that's the next step that I will do. I will train 2-3 students for coding, and then I will give them a sample of about 200, 300, 400 abstracts to code, and then I will compute reliability, student versus versus computer, or student versus student. Now, I still do have the data, and I can present you some results of this quantitative review of the literature of trust. And this is just a graph showing the number of articles on trust that have been published since 1965. And as you can see, there is a huge increase in the number of articles that have been published, starting with about 2005, right? So there is a very small slope. We have less than 100 articles per year up to 2000. And then 2005, it's a 3 times increase, a second time increase from 2005 to 2010, another second time increase for 2015, and 2020, we got to 1600 articles on trust that are have been published in that year. And 2022, we ended up with more than 2,500 articles being published, which is a lot. So in a way, I believe that we will be forced to use this kind of approach if we need to, if we want to be able to identify the proper articles that we need to read for our literature reviews. So that's one result. A second result that I do have for you, 1 second. I looked at the number of authors for the papers. So I coded them in 1 author, so single author papers with 2 authors. So one author, it's the lightest shade. And then the darkest one is 2 authors, and then 3 to 5 authors, 6 to 10, and more than 11 authors. And I looked only for these years, 1990, 1995. So every 5 years I looked at this. And as you can see, there is a change in the pattern of how papers on trust are being published, right? if in 1990 about a third of the papers were, does it have? That's that, right. So about a third of the papers in 1995, about half of them in 1995 were authored by a single person. By 2023, just 1 in 6-7 papers has a single author. And as we can see, there's also a decline in the number of papers that have 2 authors, right? 40, 30, 48%, it drops to about 25%. And nowadays, in 2020, 2023, what we have is the majority of the papers have at least 3 authors, right? So we have almost half of them with 3 to 5 authors. 10% of the papers published this year up to June, when I collected the data, have 6 to 10 authors, and there's also 2% of them that have more than 11 authors. And I think the maximum it's about 174 authors, but it's something that has to do with health studies, and you'll see when I get to that. But anyway, this is again something that shows us a change in the pattern of publications when it comes to trust. Now, which are the journals that publish the most articles on trust, right? And in here we have a surprise. You can see the first article. Let me see if I can get rid of this. Right. So the first one is Frontiers in Psychology, right? Which is a relatively new journal. It's been published in 2010, and it published since 2010 217 articles on trust. Now, just to have a reminder, we have a total of almost 20,000 articles, and these are published in about 4,900 journals in the whole data set. So basically that means about 4 articles per journal over the 65 2023 period. Top 25 journals, the ones that you have listed in here, they publish 12% of the total articles. 25 journals represent just 0.5% of all of the journals that have been collected. And the top 1% of the journals publish about 17% of the articles. Now, this is what's interesting from my perspective. Top 3, it's all of them open source, open access journals, but I cannot say for certain about Frontiers in Psychology and about +1. About sustainability, I can say for certain that to me that is a predatory journal, and it is considered a predatory journal by some countries. Norway, for instance, included sustainability and other MDPI published journals on the list of possibly predatory journals. Just to give you an idea, because I was looking into this, sustainability publishes 2 issues per month. So that's 24 issues per year. And they publish somewhere around 800 articles per issue. And they have an article processing fee of about, I don't know, 2,000 something Swiss francs or whatever that currency is. And based on my computation, they have a profit just based on the article processing charges of about 1 million euro per month from that single journal. MDPI has in total, I think, about 700 journals. So that is a huge, golden goose for them. I don't know. So that's something that we need to look into, and it's certainly going to be part of the criteria to take into account when you look at these journals. The fourth one, it's also an MDPI journal, the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. So basically the first real journal in my perspective, and I may be criticized here for being too harsh, it's the one on the 5th position, which is the Social Indicators Research. Reputable journal published since 1974, when they published only 154 articles since then. And you can see some of the journals. So some of them are going to be journals that make are not really interesting for us, like risk analysis or social science and medicine, or computers in human behavior. But others, we do know that they are reputable social sciences journals, and these are the ones that we're going to address in order to select articles that are relevant. So we have on this top 25 list, in addition to the social indicators research, we have the Journal of Trust Research, and then we have social science, quarterly political studies, political behavior, political psychology, current psychology, and Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. But we'll see more details about this in a bit. So moving on. I also looked at not only at the journals, but also the publishers, and the publishers having multiple journals, they look a little bit more normal. They look as we expect. So the main publisher is Elsevier, which is not surprising given that Scopus is owned by Elsevier. That's the criticism of Scopus. But other than that, it's, the main publishers: Routledge, Sage, Wiley, Springer, Emerald, and then on the 7th position is the MDPI, then Taylor and Francis, and so on and so forth. But that's less important probably. Now, next, I also looked at article length based on the type of journal. And overall, in all of the data set, an article on trust has about 18 pages on the average. The average is a little bit higher for journals that are published in social sciences. So we have 22, 23, 21 pages for the journals that are listed in here. By comparison, other disciplines are publishing much shorter articles, right? Social sciences and medicine, only 10 pages, personality and individual differences, an average of 7 pages. So that's also something to be said about publications on trust in social sciences by comparison to other disciplines. Now, the next step that I did, okay, we have 20,000 articles, but I really want to have fewer groups. I want to classify them. So I use topic modeling to group the 20,000 articles into 6 groups. There are multiple options. I'm not going to go into details. The only thing that I think it's important is this distinction between LDA versus STM. LDA is the standard, is the first algorithm that has been devised to do this kind of topic modeling. Structural topic modeling is a newer version which takes into account metadata in trying to group the articles in particular categories. And it helped a lot because using LDA, it resulted into 6 groups that were not very clear. But once I used STM, the other alternative, which also looks at which journal, who are the authors, how many pages, and all of the metadata, it used that to actually create self-contained groups that can be easily defined. Now, when it comes to topic modeling, you can ask it to identify itself, the algorithm, the number of topics, or you can play around a little bit. I estimated between 4 and 8 groups trying to figure out which is the best solution. The best solution was, in this particular case, a 6-group solution. So these 20,000 articles have been reduced to articles that are published on 6 topics. The first one is defined by these keywords: trust, political, public, government institutions. Frequently met words in these abstracts and that are not met in the other topics are voters, democracies, election, electoral, populist, so on and so forth. So basically, that is the first topic. It's the topic of articles that are publishing on institutional trust from the perspective of political science, in my opinion. And we can do the same exercise for the other 6 topics. I'm just going to skip over this and present you the same information, one group by one, also with the word cloud of the most commonly met words in these articles, in these abstracts, actually. So the first one is, as I said, is the institutional trust from the perspective of political science. A second group also includes trust study, but if you look at those keywords that are separating this topic from the others, it's relating to consumers, to brand, to purchase. So that together with the next words gives me an idea that this second group that was identified was related to consumer trust and perhaps to marketing as a discipline. The third type of topic, the third topic on trust is, as you can see, they're talking about homicide, capital, volunteering, social capital, residents, farmers. So that would be social capital and trust coming from sociology. The fourth type, which I did not expect to find out because I don't know this literature, I'm not reading IT literature, it's what I call technological trust. Trust in algorithms, trust in the ratings of people who are rating movies, rating products that are being bought on Amazon and so on and so forth. So this one is technological trust, I called it for the lack of a better word. It's coming from IT as a perspective. Again, this will be the type of topic that we're not interested in, so we can exclude this kind of articles. When I say that we're not interested in, in a generic way, but maybe I would be interested to see how they are operationalizing trust, how they are measuring it, and what are the mechanisms that they devise. So that's the fourth topic. The fifth topic, it's medical trust. It's related to health sciences. And as you can see, this is something that has been populated in the last years with a lot of articles that were being published on COVID. And again, what's important in here, you have COVID-19 study patients, which are giving away the fact that it's medical trust and it's related to health sciences. But also it's important that you see among these key words that separate it from the others, you have 95, which is basically the 95%. You have the CI, which is the confidence interval. So that it's already giving you an idea that it's mostly statistical analysis in this kind of articles on trust. And finally, the sixth group that has been identified, it's, again, if you look at the keywords, to me, it seems that it's related to intra-organizational trust, and probably it comes from management or human resources, whatever discipline you want to associate with it. So we do have a way of identifying, grouping these 20,000 articles in 6 categories. Before going to the last 2 slides, the next steps, what I plan to do in the next steps based on this data is to do a number of analyses, descriptive analysis, mostly because this is the first time that we have access to such a data set. So we'll start with descriptives that are going to look at the different topics, right? So I'm going to look at networks of authors by topic, number of pages by topic, citations by topic, and again, the other variables that have been coded by ChatGPT. And now I'm moving to these variables that have been coded by ChatGPT. And the first one that was really important to me for this particular step in the project was to identify the data sets, because we have one deliverable to talk about the data sets and create a data set of trust. So out of all the articles that I have into the data set, about 5,400 do have in the abstract information on the data sets, which is normal because not all of them are going to use survey data to analyze trust, right? So 28%, basically 3 out of 10 articles on trust, use some sort of data sets. Now, out of this, about 4,000 report various data sets, and I can go into details in here. It's online surveys, undifferentiated, mail surveys, telephone surveys. It's some of them are just saying national survey, nationally representative study, so on and so forth. So they don't give a lot of information, but about 1,200 do give information naming the data set that they are using. And that's the distribution of these 1,200 articles that are identifying the data sets that they are using. As you can see, European Value Study, World Value Survey, 27% of the articles that are using this kind of data are using EVS, WVS. On the second place is the European Social Survey. And then next is GSS, I included in here GSS from various countries. GSS originally is the American one, the same with NES, National Election Studies. I included all the countries that label it, I don't know, the Chinese NES. Doesn't really make sense, but anyway. The European barometer, 6% of the cases, and then as you can see, the others, Facebook, there are 4% of the articles that are using Facebook data, and then all other barometers. So basically, if I were to combine the barometers together, they would jump up on the fourth place, I think, after GSS. So it gives us an idea of which data are used by people to analyze trust. And if we know this, then we know what are the measures that they are using to measure trust. So that is helping us understand, okay, this is what they're talking about when they're talking about trust. And secondly, I looked at the regions that are being studied. Again, this is, I already checked the ChatGPT coding, and it was okay. This is the type of easy coding because you just need to identify countries or regions or cities or whatever. So what I did in here, I assigned the name of the country to the article if ChatGPT told me the name of the country or a name of a region in the country or the name of a city in the country, right? So studies on China. China is the most studied country when it comes to trust. 13% of these 11,000 articles are studying China. They're also studying some cities in China, some regions in China, some Chinese companies for those who are working on organizational trust and so on and so forth. The second most studied country in the world when it comes to trust is the USA, 12.5%. And then world and Europe, if there were multiple countries named by ChatGPT because they were labeled in the abstract, I coded it as world if there were countries from all over the world, Europe if there were only European countries, and there's also somewhere down here Asia, only Asian countries. But basically these are just comparative studies in nature. So we have about, basically on the first place, it would be about 21% of the studies which are comparative in nature. And then other countries, we have UK, Australia. So what's to see in here, basically just from this very quick presentation of the regions that are being studied. It's mostly studied in Western European countries with some of the key Asian countries as well. So we have Korea, South Korea, Japan, India. We also have Russia in there and some Middle Eastern, North African countries. So that's basically where I am with this. It's a working project. As I said, the next steps would be first check the coding of ChatGPT and then try to compare the various topics and how they differ on the metadata and the other variables that I have been collected so far. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudio, for this very interesting insight into the, I would say, scientific production, including also the discussion about the trust regarding the publication industry, which is very, very familiar to many of us. This MDP publishing house was excluded from all grant agencies in Czech Republic, and the people are trying to to hidden their previous publication.
And we are at the point where there are awards, financial awards for people that are publishing with Web of Science. And this year, there is a person at one university in Romania who published 80 MDPI papers, and she's being rewarded, financially rewarded for them. So basically, she will earn something like 60,000 euros for publishing in 1 year in 2020, 80 articles in those journals. So there is a fight within our own community, but again, that's irrelevant for topic.
Thanks. I assume that the recorder in Czech Republic was also about 100 articles in 1 year, né? and we know the name because it was publicized, and it was really, I would say, starting point for the fundamental debate about financing of these activities, firstly, and about these cheating activities that are related also with the authors, not only with the reviews. So I open the floor for the discussion. Jan is the first.
Thank you for this fascinating project and presentation. For me, it was the first insight how to use ChatGPT in academia. So thank you very much for that. And it was fascinating how many trust-related topics we have. It reminded me when I was doing, when I was conducting research about migration, and when I was looking at the migration topic, then it appears newspapers about the birds, of course, but also about the sports. You don't know how many migration topics are in the sport. Whatever. My question, I have a question. You said that you did a check with the ChatGPT, and the check was okay. What does it mean for me? What does it mean to be okay? And one more question, more like general, I'm curious. I understand that this what you are doing is like preparation for the project to know who is publishing about trust and what's the topics inside. And the question is, could you use the data which you collected for some research paper? And if so, what would be the topic on what would be the argument of this research paper? Thank you. Thank you very much.
They cannot hear you and they already complained.
Sorry. So given the type of data that is in here, and given that I'm not actually reading the papers, of course, it's not going to be an argument that is related to theories of trust. It's an argument related to the production of scientific literature on trust. And I will try to identify as many characteristics as possible that are setting it aside from other types of publications. Now, to me, the meat of this type of analysis will be in the network analysis, because that will tell us who is it that it's publishing, where, and we will be able to identify clusters of authors that are linked or maybe that are not linked to one another. The second component that I think it's important is this one, because we, up to this point, at least to my knowledge, up to this point, up until I presented this slide, we didn't know how many countries were being studied when it comes to trust, right? So now it's a little bit easier to have an idea, and for other people, maybe the next step would be to select a sample of articles on a group of countries and see whether or not the theoretical perspective differs. I suspect discussions of trust in China will be quite different from discussions of trust in the US or in any other country. Or maybe somebody will want to make an analysis by comparing analysis of trust in China versus trust in Hong Kong versus trust in Taiwan versus trust in Macau, because there's also Macau in there somewhere. So that would be an interesting article to write, I suppose. So yeah, it's not going to be theoretical. It's not going to help advance discussions on trust, theoretical discussions of trust, but it will help in other ways. What I also plan to do, and it's also part of this project, now that I have devised this algorithm, basically every 6 months I can, just run the whole code and extract whatever has been published, and then group again the articles that are collected into the 6 categories, or maybe check whether there are new categories that appear, and put those on this website that we're going to create as part of the project, the Observatory of Trust in Europe. So there are multiple ways in which we can develop these. But again, I would do anything to work as little as possible. So having ChatGPT available to do the work for me, of course, I had to see how I can use it in order to simplify my work, because I don't like working. I think nobody really likes working. So if you can get the computer to work for you, that's better. But again, it's still early stages. I mean, ChatGPT just appeared less than 1 year ago. It's November 2022. And we need to actually check very well the coding that ChatGPT does. And that brings me to your first question. How did I check? What does it mean that it was okay? Basically, what I checked was only whether the countries and the data sets that ChatGPT identified were actually into the abstracts. And I also checked the abstracts to see if there weren't any that ChatGPT missed. So it was not as scientific, because I will ask the students to do that so that I can compute reliability measures. But based on that's what I did for about 3 days, just went through the codes of ChatGPT and checking the abstract. ChatGPT says France. Was France in the abstract? It was. Great. Was there anything else? No, ChatGPT identified only France. It was only France. Perfect. That's good coding on behalf of ChatGPT. And this is the type of information that ChatGPT can actually identify very easily, because it's not a lot of information. It knows that I'm asking about countries, regions, cities, so it knows about it. As I said, when it comes to identifying the theories, I was looking at the dependent variable, independent variable as well. It also did a good job, but I did not finish checking it. But when it comes to theories, it starts having problem because it cannot really identify the theories. So that's where probably I will try to first tweak a little bit the prompt, make it more clear to ChatGPT what I want. Maybe give it more examples because it learns from examples, and then use the 4th version, which from what I've read from the company that created ChatGPT is actually, I don't know, 10 times better at identifying stuff like that. So that's the next step again. But again, it took me a while to learn how to use those because I was not aware of ChatGPT a year ago. So I had to learn that and, see how you can use it in Python or in R or whatever, and devise all sorts of measures for it. Okay, any other question?
Thank you.
Just a very short comment. Thank you very much, Claudia. It's very no, there's no need for that. That's a very impressive work, really. It gives a very good an idea of the trust research field, really, like possibility to view inside it. It was quite interesting that the ChatGPT identified that 3 out of 10 articles are based on some sort of data. Does it mean that the remaining 7 are primarily theoretical, or the data is just poorly documented in the abstract? I know from the World Value Survey that many our data users, they fail to mention that they actually use the World Value Survey data. They just write very proudly that they analyze a data set with 100 countries without naming it. And this is when we know. Yeah, if I will finish here. Thank you. Yeah, so my first question is if the remaining 7 out of 10 are mainly theoretical papers, and then on the number of authors, co-authors, that's really interesting. I guess we don't have an answer to that, but do you think this is driven by more collaboration in the field of trust research, or by the requirement for all of us to publish a lot to keep the jobs and get promotions?
So I'll start with the authorship question. It has to do it's a guess for now because I still have to look in more detail into the data, but it has to do with the fact that we have more data that is available and more cooperation across countries. There's more, there's the European funds, there's the online cooperation, which is a lot easier and which was not really possible 20 years ago. So I would say that, of course, there might be some element of ghost authorship in there, maybe add another person on the list of authors just to help him or her advance in career, whatever. But I suspect that is just a minor component of it. When it comes to this information, 3 out of 10 articles use some sort of data. It has to do, so as I said, I grouped them into 6 topics, and not all of them are the topics that are of interest to us. So those that are related to tech trust, to medical trust, of course, they're going to use other data that we're not going to find in here. So I will rerun this kind of analysis by looking within the 6 topics. I just didn't have time to do that. So basically, I expect that when I select only the topic 1, that is, or maybe topic 1 and topic 3, political science and sociology, then the percentage will be a lot higher in this case. So that's because we are looking now also those papers that are coming from medical sciences, management, marketing, and so on and so forth. So they are keeping down this. What you mentioned, the fact that people do not really put into the abstract the type, so that's another limitation. I'm looking only at the abstract, not the text of the paper. So if it's not in the abstract, it's not there. I cannot code it. That's one, if they don't put it into the abstract. Second, you were right. Some of them are not saying I use WVS. Some say we analyzed 120 countries over a period of 20 years. Of course, that makes me think that it's EVS because it cannot be, or WVS because it cannot be anything else. You don't have ESS over 20 years. You don't have GSS in 100 countries. So yeah, maybe I would do additional checks and code them as EVS, WVS as well. So that would be a solution to it. But even so, EVS, WVS, it's still on the first position. More than a quarter of the articles on trust are analyzed using our data, and I call it our because I identify to some extent to EVS and WVS.
Thank you. If I may, I have the feeling it's very interesting that trust was maybe in the 80s, 90s more the sole researcher in the ivory tower sitting there, like Peter Schomker, in trust. So these lone scholars writing big philosophical, historical books. Whereas now, as the topic becomes more critical and political sensitive, this seems to be the teams are formed, like our team, by European Union, by research foundations. And this is then, and as we know, in the European Union, I had a grant on health in Eastern Europe. There were 10 authors for every article. And suddenly there was an expert on diabetes, and because it was part of this team. And so I think this is, now it moves more towards collaborative research, team research, project research, because there's more public funding for it. So it's we move away from these big books by Peter Schomker and others to something completely different. But it's very interesting. Thank you very much.
Okay, then, if there are any other questions, or maybe we should just go to coffee break.
It's an excellent proposal. Thank you very much, Claudio. Thanks to this morning session. My suggestion is to have a 10 minutes break. Definitely sanitary break, and we need some rest. And our colleagues need some time to upload their PowerPoint presentations also to the computer. So let's meet shortly before noon. Exactly. Thanks. Workshop. As usually, we start a little bit late as agreed, but I have to tell that yesterday I was at the scientific conference of historians in Warsaw, and already after the first presentation, we have a 1 hour delay. So I would say that we are just in scope. So let me introduce the respected colleague Zora Hesová from the Faculty of Arts at the Charles University here in Prague. He slightly modified the title of her presentation compared with the previous program. So Zora, the floor is yours. We use the micro because we do have also online.
Yes. So thanks everybody for having me here. I am I'm an outsider following your project very much from outside, not really knowing yet what it is about. So I will attempt to connect with the issue of democracy and trust from a point of view of a very particular research topic on culture wars in Central and Eastern Europe, and present something that's very much a work in progress. That's going to be a paper at some point, but it's still a work in progress. So any comments are welcome. I will be reflecting with you on the issue of contesting human rights and in the context of culture wars in the Czech Republic specifically, as something that is the normative basis of democracy and something that has been under stress, not only in Poland and Hungary, as we know, but also in the Czech Republic, which is a country that is not usually not singled out as a battlefield of various illiberal forces. So my presentation will introduce the subject, this specific human rights backlash, not as an ideological issue, but in the context of political dynamics, concrete political dynamics, and in the context of the very specific Czech Republic culture wars. And the argument is to look for, I mean, the attempt and the thesis and the aim is to look for ways in which no structural processes, no larger societal processes, but particular political dynamics undermine brittle liberal consensus on a specific issue, meaning human rights, which may be a bit sound a bit alarmist. We are in the Czech Republic where we are still far away from whatever is happening in Poland or Hungary or on the borders of the EU, but still, I believe there is a lot of stakes in following the process in which normative basis of democracies are actually being directly or indirectly undermined. So I will first introduce a critical debate about human rights that's been ongoing since a decade now, at least. So it's nothing new. Human rights have been contested. This is not a problem, but they have been contested in an increasingly polarizing, militant, and aggressive way. Then I will introduce the subject of culture wars and explain why I think culture wars specifically are an interesting context to this questioning. And then finally, I will offer some reflections or diagnosis pertaining to the issue of trust or mistrust. So it is not work based on a particular empirical study. It's a work based on analyzing discourses and political dynamics. So human rights are contested. This is nothing new. Even in the Czech Republic, and the Czech Republic very specifically from 2014 onwards, in the very open public sphere, since a moment in which the Czech foreign policy documents, who used to be very much focused on human rights and the legacy of Václav Havel have been put into question in actually a very interesting way. Yeah, the discussion in 1914 and 1915 was intellectually interesting. It produced a lot of papers in the intellectual parts of various journals. There was an interesting book that came out in 2015. It was enhanced. This debate was obviously a reflection of the U.S. interventionism and a lot of various developments in the foreign policy, but also a reflection of the changes in the Czech Republic, where the first populist comes to power, President Zeman, and intends to change the relations with China, and Petr Druhák, an important figure who brings in actually a set of interesting critical arguments, and he provokes a discussion. So what is important about 2014 is that this discussion was very civil, was complex, and it showed that actually there is no consensus on the intellectual foundations, that actually human rights are complicated subject, that intellectuals, lawyers, activists, professors can actually argue at a lot of aspects of them in a very civil way. What has changed is the tone in which only a year later human rights are framed in a mainstream media debate, but also then later in public debate. So obviously you don't have to be reminded. There is the so-called migration crisis, in which routine denial of rights, routine denial of human dignity, distinguishing people by race or religion become normalized, become everyday events, and in which the tolerance of inhuman treatment of the wrong foreigners becomes normalized in some way. So we have seen that apart from complex, I mean, away from the complex intellectual debates, the reality of public figures, media, politicians in their defense of universality of human rights is actually very much short of what one would expect from them. And I'm not going into details about this or that migration policies, which would be an interesting debate. And I'm speaking really about the way human rights were framed. So in the public, the abandonment of universalism is not very much contested in the Czech Republic, unlike, for example, Austria or Germany. The rejection of right to asylum is legitimized on religious and civilization grounds, which is kind of shocking. And there are lots of cultural arguments that come to matter. This is the big change of the 2015. Not so much the fact that actually the Czech state has not come to its, I mean, has not fulfilled its various international agreements, which happens all the time, but the legitimization of this on cultural grounds is very much new. There is a second part in which I would add, and this is a debate about individual rights, mostly minority rights, something that also reflects developments in Poland and Hungary. In the Czech Republic, the only country in this region actually debates an equal marriage bill, but unlike 10 years ago, when the registration of same-sex partnerships was accepted, this decade brings in a reaction, a strong mobilization against. It comes in as a counter bill, that comes in as a counter competition against this bill, and a systematic mobilization of support to this counter bill. So all of a sudden, a bill that is for a lot of people controversial becomes a matter of a real conflict. And this conflict is interesting in the sense that it's not a conflict about rights. It becomes very, very quickly a conflict about the framing of this development. So not so much discussion about, like, do these families deserve this kind of protection or this kind of social or fiscal exemptions. No, it's like, do they actually have the right to demand these rights? Are they actually legitimate subjects in politics? And a sort of war of this kind develops, in which the framing of rights is changes from debating rights and socioeconomic dimension of certain rights, like a marriage, which is an important part of the proposal, becomes debated as a privilege, in which moral panic is intently sown, and in which actually the talk of rights becomes very blurred and confusing, because all of a sudden the opponents also talk about rights to a family, over its children. So all of a sudden we start to lose our ground. And I'm only talking about the debate in the parliament. So this is a very public debate. So migration and equal marriage obviously are the two very much profiled topic in culture wars, but we have also a debate about an international treaty where things are not in principle controversial. Violence against women, that is tackled in the so-called Istanbul Convention, is in itself a very non-controversial issue, but even this gets in these culture wars framed as something that can introduce a moral panic or all sorts of reframing, in which the word gender becomes to matter, the concept of gender, and in which we see the parliament introduce, I mean, the government introduces actually a systematic policy of denying the myths and the panic sown around the Istanbul Convention. an international treaty that has still not been ratified by the Czech Parliament and will probably be discussed very soon. So what does this all mean? I believe these three events or these three conflicts can be, are examples of so-called culture wars. So the word culture wars is also a very non-precise concept that I use usually when I write. If in a text you would get two pages of explanations, which I don't have time for now. But for me, it doesn't mean only an ideological dispute, but the fact that political conflicts and social disputes are framed increasingly in cultural terms. It's a process of culturalization of social political cleavages, and in which these cleavages produce polarizing effects, sometimes super polarizing effects, in the sense that the whole of society at a moment usually doesn't last too long, but at a moment for a few weeks or months gets politicized and polarized. And the important and these culture wars are usually linked to a sort of competition among right-wing parties, where the liberals or leftists obviously assist. Yeah, it's not not to take them out, exempt them from the culture wars, but in which these cultural issues start to dominate, or these totally replace all sorts of other issues, socioeconomic, taxation, distribution, and they develop in the Czech Republic, but also in Poland and Hungary and Slovakia and everywhere around issues about norms, symbols, and values. In the Central and Eastern Europe, politics of memory was important also. I'm leaving it aside. Usually it's about the identity of migrants and social and reproductive rights and norms, in which the talk about these issues gets usually reframed in a cultural polarizing way. Now, what is interesting about culture wars is not only that liberals and conservatives fight over a norm or a value, but it is in fact a battle for power, not only about battle. I mean, not only an expression of a different opinion about this and this or this symbol, but a battle of power in which a competition among right-wing parties. Usually, we have seen this in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, repeatedly in Poland and Hungary, radicalize on cultural issues over who gets to dominate a discursive field and over who attacks or resists the so-called, the purported liberal hegemony the best. A sort of fight over often a Christian voice, like in Slovakia, or a social conservative voice or national voice in the Czech Republic. This kind of a competition has this pernicious effect of legitimizing and mainstreaming a lot of positions and thoughts that used to be marginal, far right, extremists, and now are very much involved in the whole this kind of power for votes and voices on the right wing. And it has an anti-elitist dimension, which is important because this anti-elitist and anti-globalizing dimension allows to actually link geopolitics and cultural issues, and a sort of and lots of nationalist positions. So what culture wars mean for me is that they actually come as a struggle over cultural hegemony, which means a struggle over who defines norms, who controls symbols, public spaces, who mobilizes identities. So who the one who defines what liberty, totality, gender, traditional identity is. This the one who will be whose voice will be heard, who will be rewarded in elections, who will also end up controlling important institutions or boards of important institutions and so on. So the war over cultural hegemony is all about blurring meanings, you know, undermining meanings of certain words, like, for example, this word of gender, or as we shall see, human rights. or really kidnapping the meaning. So when you say gender in the Czech Republic today, everybody will understand gender ideology, which is two different things. Gender being an analytical, complex concept from social sciences and the sort of expert context, whereas gender ideology is like a counter concept involving a lot of very different meanings. The word right is very often framed as a privilege, you know, or in a different context in a different way. So and this struggle over cultural hegemony is an anti-hegemonic, is usually for many of its actors an anti-hegemonic position in which they paint or they subscribe to this idea that there is a liberal or other kind of hegemony. They are the victims. They have to mobilize to defend their important rights. So in this way, and this is a very general reflection, culture wars do undermine gradually the basis of social consensus in terms of mutual intelligibility. So we can't speak about gender in public today because we don't understand each other anymore, or we speak about different things. The human rights are a very particular issue that have become also subject of controversial debates, especially on a specific margin of the public scene, not in the mainstream, I have to say, but on a margin that becomes increasingly important because this voice that questions human rights has actually entered certain institutions, like, for example, the Czech Ombudsman Office. And it's also led mostly by Petr Drulák, who's a professor of political science, actually a former ambassador, actually a respected intellectual who has led this critical dispute 10 years ago. This dispute that I found interesting and critical, and he still has a lot of interesting points. And he often refers to Alain de Benoit, a very controversial French author, also a very erudite intellectual who actually functions on the margin of the French Republic of Letters from a position of the so-called Nouvelle Droite. So this is an intellectual, not an activist or far right, but an intellectual questioning of human rights that actually more and more turns into a denial and rejection of the human rights as such. There is a slippage. There is a sort of a process in which argumented criticism actually becomes very much a position that pertains to culture wars because it becomes reductive, polarizing, and aggressive. And Petr Drulák, in some of his texts, he's a complex personality, so I would not. It's hard to pin him down. In some of his texts, he's very articulate and complex, and in others, especially in the media, he's very blunt, in which he speaks about human rights as a pernicious notion that must be fundamentally rejected. This is a quote. Absurdity of universalism. He reduces human rights to their political instrumentalization and appears to actually abandon universalism. And this is the anti-universalist position that's actually quite new, strongly articulated by someone who is respected and who has a certain intellectual appeal, and who actually has already brought this discourse in the institutions like the Ombudsman Office and others in the Czech administration. So there is a discursive struggle going on that's not only, how would I say, it's not only mediatic or intellectual, it actually happens in institutions. So what does it mean for the topic of your research and Czech Republic? These culture wars that I date, this last chapter of, this is my third and last part, this last chapter of culture wars that I date back to 2013, so last decade, has led to certain changes in the way we discuss important fundamentals of democratic processes. A lot of important and crucial notions like human rights and gender have been politicized and reframed in a way in which they are termed as an ideology. And ideology is as a social scientist, we would use the word in in various ways, but in this political everyday use, ideology is negative. It means a manipulative worldview that serves the interests of a particular group, clothed in some fakely universal terms. So ideology is a negative term in the usage in the mainstream, and also in when this word is used as a sort of Kampfbegriff, is it used as an attack of the word of attack, that views the political as an agonistic field in which there is an us, usually defined in national, religious, or civilizational terms, facing a them, and elites or the others from outside. And gender and human rights are very much instrumental to proving, to showing, to performing this kind of polarization, this kind of threatened position of the us. What it also, this is the way people speak, but what it also means and implies for all of us is the fact that whatever social constructivist position you can have in a discussion becomes very difficult to defend. So when you now use certain complex words like gender, or words that actually allow us to develop policies leading to social reform, like race, gender, or even religion, in a socially constructivist way in which you deny essentialism and you actually want to introduce a perspective that leads to a sort of social reform, you are not understood anymore. I mean, gender has been kidnapped, now means something different, and denying gender ideology in quotation marks actually means coming back to denying social engineering, denying a sort of fake voluntarism that's implied in this word, in this concept, and brings back a simplistic essentialism and naturalism. So a common sense has come back through these culture wars, and there is actually it's kind of difficult to step out of this reintroduction of a common sense that speaks of binarity of sexes now on this very simplistic level of a clash of civilization and naturalness of hierarchies, be they social, gender, or racial. So this is all I see as a consequences of these culture wars, and more generally the way in which cultural issues are used in the battle for power, and as a theater for power, in which cultural issues are actually instrumentalized for political struggle. The consequences is clearly a reduction of many of these issues. So human rights and gender, for just two examples, we would probably find more, are reduced very often to one negative aspect. So when the critics of human rights speak, they always refer to the US instrumentalization of human rights, as if this would invalidate the idea and the norm of human rights. There is a general hermeneutics of mistrust. So when speaking about these complex terms that are being reduced, it becomes mainstream to actually think or want to critically unmask some hidden true meaning of these issues, of these texts or actions that rely upon them. So when you see gender in the Istanbul Convention, half of our parliament today, maybe more, sees it as a pernicious plan of someone from outside to actually dissolve our legal system or our family. It is this kind of talk is very much legitimized and very much mainstream now. So hermeneutics of mistrust, together with a conspirational perspective, become two frames in which we talk, and that are actually increasingly difficult to withstand in public debate. And this all I see as a consequence, as one of the consequences of the culture war. So to conclude, I will just show you a recent picture from Eastern Slovakia. There are elections in a few weeks. And so one of the mainstreamed, or more or less, I mean, now non-parliamentary, but maybe up and coming, formerly far right, now national conservative party has basically, how do I say, normalized this kind of talk, this kind of attack on rights, very simply. So what I wanted to say is that human rights are a basis of post-communist social consensus, but this consensus has proven brittle, not only under the burden of actual demands of solidarity and assistance on the basis of human rights or asylum rights, but also because the political struggle has clearly moved to a large extent onto a cultural ground, onto issues of norms and on values, and in which these discursive disputes that are now engaging a lot of political parties, instead of, for example, the disputes being about taxation, they undermine a lot of explicit and hitherto unquestioned foundational norms of a social consensus or a political consensus. It is actually very simple to undermine a consensus. Consensus is strong when it's not questioned, it's not made explicit, when it's actually not undermined, when it's not trolled, you know, when it's not getting it's not under attack, when it's actually somehow consensus is strong when it is part of the unquestioned. Once you start to question it, or once you start to make it explicit, which is we are in a situation in which, according to Olivier Roy, a lot of social norms are demanded are made more and more explicit. So they lose their cultural power, and this is what's happening also with certain foundational norms of democracy, where human rights and rights in general, the terms of gender or liberties are made a battleground, and in which they are losing this kind of unquestioned solidity. So this would be my conclusion, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, the insight of into the not only Czech but specifically Czech debate and the construction of this counter-cosmopolitan part, including the intellectual background of this. So I'm really happy to have also this paper on distrust as being an important part of trust studies. In this sense, I would say it perfectly fits into the scope of the workshop. It's a pity that Pippa Norris is not here, because she co-wrote the book Cultural Backlash, and this would be very interesting, I would say, feedback given on this topic. Indeed, I'm sure that specifically the Czech colleagues might have some questions and comments. Nevertheless, of course, the debate is fully open. So who would like?
Okay, yeah. Perhaps I thank you for your presentation. It was just excellent to me. But I have a question, because when I was from the Mars landing to this spot, and there would be a referendum on gay marriages, for instance, I perceived the debate lobby from both conservative radicals and intolerant liberals as very actually stubbornly against the other. There are barriers, and I would not go to the referendum at all. I would be just misguided by both arguments that the radical wings of both, you know, I feel very, very intolerant. And what you showed, I have no problem with that, but there were only that, for me, very weird conservative or pseudo-conservative wings and radicals, and whether there are also some intolerant liberals to this issue, because there are some moderate conservatives, they argue with some arguments for family issues, that is men and women, and sometimes they are also labeled as being homophobic. that's only just for their reason, because I know, like, for instance, in Italy, there was 40% of people by that referendum, they were against the gay marriages, but I don't think we should label them, all of them, to be that kind. Thank you.
No, I totally agree. These culture wars have two sides. There would be no war if there were two sides, and many of the grievances pointed by the conservative side are real, in the sense this would warrant a specific analysis that I always don't want to make, because I don't want to be part of the culture wars. I want to be outside, but there is a certain asymmetry. So I would say that the liberal side has a sort of international ascendant. It is true that these issues are a norm in the West, and that people coming from the East often encounter a sort of arrogancy from coming from the West on these issues, and this, I think, is a lot of motivation for many of those culture warriors to actually reject everything. This is, I think, is one. The other is actually a complicated development in the sphere of gender thought and activism that many have difficult to follow. So there is like objective complexity that's being negotiated in Western Europe in a very controversial way too. And when it comes to us, just to simplify it, and this has to be somehow negotiated. And it's actually interesting how it's negotiated in the West. I think it comes in a very simplistic terms to us, and then the conflicts are just primitive from both sides, right? But the asymmetry is, I think, in that the conservative side has linked a certain conservative side, depends whom. I mean, there is no hegemonic field. Certain of these actors have actually linked their political ascendancy to the resistance to a so-called liberal hegemony, and this is problematic because I would probably, if I were to analyze, I would find a lot of legitimate debates and issues, but the way this conflict is framed is very often clearly destructive to democratic processes. Labeling the others in negative ways from both sides, putting into question universalism, putting into question equality is problematic, and not everybody does it, but a lot of very vocal actors, like for example the far right, they do it systematically, and they haven't mainstreamed it. You know, it would be much more interesting to have a discussion with like centrists from both sides and actually argument it. And I think, I'm not sure how it would end up, and it would be an open debate, I think, but this is not happening. So I agree with you. There is two sides, and they have asymmetric positions, and this asymmetry is, I think, one of the reasons why this struggle is so sometimes aggressive, especially in other countries than the Czech Republic, where you actually have almost revolutionary forces that want to redo the political institutions of a country, and they use culture. They use and instrumentalize cultural issues, and for the political communication in the country, this is very detrimental, I would say, because. And I would also say it's hard to make a clear line between arguments, socio-economic issues, legitimate arguments, and non-legitimate culture. It's difficult to make a clear line. I don't see it myself, but somehow there is one, and it gets transgressed usually from a certain. Yeah, it gets transgressed very often by radical elements, especially those who actually aspire to political success in situations when they cannot access it otherwise. So,
thank you.
Before giving the floor to Claudio, one comment to this. This is also something we have found in the deliverable we already provided in the first draft, and this is this, I would say, transition of polarization from political into the more general polarization. What is very typical, and you mentioned it. Using one name, okay, very visible in Czech discourse, Petr Drulák. It's exactly this. So the polarization penetrates universities. The polarization penetrates media. Basically, we do have now media and alternative media recently in Czech Republic. Sometimes we are not able to find the dividing line between those two groups of medias. We are afraid we can observe this polarization within other institutions. Hopefully not in the army and police, but and this is something that is very visible. This once primarily political polarization really became much more evident. And this is the question, is it socioeconomic or sociocultural? I would say both in that way. And I fully agree with what Przemek said. This is the problem that basically is also at our side. Of course, it's very difficult to talk with somebody who doesn't listen to you, who is not prepared to accept your argument. And I would say it is not democratic in that way. So I'm trying to speak with Petr Drulák every week. We do have offices next to each other, but definitely I'm talking with him only because he is prepared to listen to me, and he is still prepared to accept some of your arguments. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. And this is the problem, that I would say that this radical or even extreme part of this polarized groups, they are not able to talk to each other. So the gap is, I would say, getting bigger in that way. I do have one technical comment.
To you, I strongly agree with you. There is not only toxification of these culture wars into media, environment, etc., but also for your Horizon project and cleavages, it's quite difficult to read it, because in that there is a mixture of conservatives, ultra-conservatives, democratic socialists. If you look at some people, there are some anti-COVID libertarians and also esoteric people. They are, and it's tied to some mixture of two Russian propaganda, sometimes not based on disinformation, but on misinformation. They don't even know that they are pro-Russian propagandists, etc. So it's a bunch of people, and you can see in the spectra all of this: rural people, engineers. You know, so that's difficult to take it.
And then it's the most easiest way is just to use the term desolate, and it covers, it's an umbrella term for all these people.
Yes, thank you for the paper. It was really interesting the way you framed the argument, and it always surprises me to see things like this happening in the Czech Republic, because at one level, I am aware that it's an issue that affects pretty much all of our region. It's not only Czechia, it's not only Poland, Hungary, it's also Romania, Bulgaria, and all the others. But, you know, that's knowing it intellectually. And then I start from this assumption. I know the Czech Republic, it's probably one of the most separate from religion countries in our region, by comparison to Romania, for instance, which is highly religious. And it's interesting because I see the same developments. It's only probably some of the forms that may differ. And I just want to give you two quotes from Romanian MPs that were part of this debate related to the referendum that took place in Romania for changing the definition of the family as part of an attempt to keep so one of them, liberal, said, "We Romanians will not allow the pink tank from Brussels to crush the soul of this nation." So anything that has to do with LGBT is equated with Brussels. And yeah. And then the second one, and this is probably one of the points where Romania differs from the Czech Republic, it links directly to the religion. we've always been, and links religion and our religion to whatever the fate of Romania in the world. We've always been faced with discrimination because we are Orthodox. When we wanted to join the European Union, the Catholic countries created the Visegrad group, and they were quickly allowed in. By contrast, Romania was coupled with Bulgaria so that if one is progressing, the other one will keep it behind. We've always been throughout history the defensive shield of Europe, and here is, you know, the whole history of us being the protectors of Europe. Our efforts never recognized. Even the Turks, which was stopped from their victorious march to Rome, have appreciated us more than Catholic Europe. So that's the imaginary that is being spit out from the parliament tribune, and that people not knowing a lot of history, not being educated enough, are accepting as you know, as facts rather than rather obnoxious opinions that some people might have. And this one was MP from the Social Democrats. So the two main political parties in Romania, these are, and then these are the second and the third place in the upcoming elections, the first place being the guys that are actually more radical than these.
Think you are going to react?
Can I have one sentence?
Of course.
Just to add on. Thank you. This is very interesting, this question about the Catholic, because my impression was that Czech Republic is a very secular country, religion, the lowest level of church attendance and so on. So how in Austria, in Romania, others, so you have this culture wars linked with religion. So the Catholic Church has some role and so on. And whereas if their religion is not very powerful in Czech Republic, what is the feeding of the culture wars? Because in our country, it's easy. It's Protestants, Catholic, Orthodox. But in your country, you are not godless, but you are secular. And nevertheless, you have this culture wars, which is for us who are victims of religious suppression, very interesting and not easy to understand.
I would say that the intensity of culture wars is much higher in the surrounding countries than here, but they exist too. And I think there is a demand, you know, there is a demand for symbolic politics or for this culturalized politics. And the churches, especially the Czech Republic, the Catholic Church provides some elements of this war because for various reasons. One is transnational, because actually the Catholic Church is involved in these wars transnationally. So we had a lot of those inputs from Catholic publicists, not hierarchical Catholics, but a network of publicists who were active in the whole region. And secondly, the church has politicized recently because of this war. 10 years ago, a law about the separation of state and church, in which the church actually has become a political and economic actor that has started to use the civil society as a means of remaining socially relevant, and also the politics of having access to the decision makers. 5 years ago, there was still an idea to actually tax the churches, whatever money churches getting back from the state. So there is a political stake for the church. This has changed, and I think it's basically a demand. The symbols, national and the religious symbols have been culturalized, secularized, and there's a demand for that. So.
So it's about institutions, but what about the society? No? So my hypothesis, I made some research, but it's a long time ago. No? My hypothesis is that in Czechia specifically, communism was another form of political religion with very conservative background. Now, if you look on exactly on these issues of gender, role of men and women in the family, in the society, in the politics, by the way, and so on, the regime was extremely conservative. The perception of homosexuals they were banned by law. So I would say this is legacy. This is legacy that continues in the society, maybe with other actors in some way. Specific role is played by, I would say, pan-Slavism that is related with some, I would say, ultra conservative positions. In that way, I would stress that not only the Catholic churches, also important members of Hussite Church play, I would say, a very negative role in that way, specifically hierarchy. And I would say that the third issue, it is exactly analyzed by Austrian political scientist Christian Weidinger. He's talking about this, and this came specifically with anti-Islamism in this society, with the Czech president talking about the European values we have to follow and so on. So Weidinger uses this term "belongers, not believers." So we belong to Christian Europe, not being Christian. What is important? We are anti-Islamic. You made a research on that, but I would say this is something that we are Christian because it means we are not Islamic, and we are against Islam. And here it's a very specific mixture, because it is not only demand, but there are also important actors that I would say come with this agenda. Is agenda setting issue. So two former presidents. One of them member of Hussite Church. The second one basically strongly pro-Russian. And I would say these actors, the think tanks related with the first mentioned, all these made this, I would say, mosaic of ugly issues that we face today.
One more issue to add to your question, and I think it's quite important. Petr Kratochvíl recently wrote an article that Christianity became a political tool of weaponization of Christianity. It's not only the church, it's true what Láďa and what Zora said here before me, but it's not about the mother of Christian values, but about Christian roots. And civilizational ethos, like Roger Brubaker said, we are civilization. Anti-Islamic discourse, which came around 2010, slightly into a main discourse like President Zeman, etc. But before it was thematized by radicals like National Party, and then by Bobošíková 2010. It started by then. And then before that, from 90s and later, they want to teach about Christianity. Don't take to our children in the schools, but now teach them about Christianity. It's a weapon, it's a shield against Islamism, and that we have some Christian, Euro-Christian values, not values, but roots. So you don't go to church, but we have these roots. So maybe it brings this explanation. Of course, there is a huge still role of the Christian Catholic Church in this significant part of the society, but even leftists, even the last thing to add, previous head of Communist Party of the Czech and Moravia said after Americans were just expelled from Taliban, from Afghanistan, he said, Christian army lost in Middle East. Head of Communist Party, you can find it.
Okay, thank you very much. Zora, it was very interesting. Thank you for that. And I assume that your presentation will follow a little bit in this way. So I would like to open the floor for Přemysl Rosulek, a friend of mine in the last at least 25 years. We co-established the Department of Politics in Pilsen together. And Přemysl is going to present the paper. I will just open commenting on politics, anti-Ukrainism in the Czech Republic, the case of Facebook page, Plzeňáci in the city of Pilsen, so my home.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. I congratulate you to your Horizon project. It's quite good for you, and it's actually good for our country too. The more Horizon projects, the better in science. And I go back to the issue. Is it already? Because you need to go. Can I move it by this? Perhaps. Yeah, I can move it. You just keep it. Anti-Ukrainism. I have actually, as far as my current project is concerned, it's based upon the topic which is quite uncommon, quite under-researched, That's in several aspects. Anti-Ukrainism was lethal. There was this issue subconsciously, but there was anti-Islamism, there was anti-Roma, there were anti-Roma attitudes, etc., but not in general anti-Ukrainism. And then that there is a media environment, but we should be more concerned about hybrid media environment and rise of informal, local, that's the third dimension, communities in disseminating, intoxicating discourse, online public discourse, and spreading over into public discourse and into creating attitudes or setting the agendas. So there are numerous states awareness of TV share, you know, and what is the best, and online media or paper media. But there are these new gatekeepers and opinion makers, hidden, untouched, unseen, subconsciousness, but they are just creating the values. But we know about politicians, experts, global national celebrities, including non-political players, but and also we know about fake news environment. So these all are quite visible and quite known, quite identified. But I'm focused on underestimated players, as far as I know, in the local media system. Local environment, but global issues. Local Facebook community, Plzeňáci. Pilsen has 160,000-70,000 people, but this is 1/3 of the people. Not all of them are from Pilsen, but in fact, I'm just focusing on common Facebook users, on commenting posts related to Ukraine crisis in 2022 in Pilsen. As far as literature overview, related to Ukrainians in the Czech Republic, migration, etc., there are many historical, sociological, anthropological works. There are very few political science works related to political science. There is a short overview. If you want, write me emails, etc. I can send you the vast literature, what does exist, because I think I didn't add the bibliography here due to span of time. And but general, this is just before the Islamic or European migration crisis, or so-called European migration crisis. You see those under 50%, those which are rather bad by the Czechs. You know, how would you take it if you had a foreign neighbor? You know, these EVS projects, and all of them are looking that Czechs are xenophobic. Yes, they are. But Russians, Ukrainians, Vietnamese, Arab, Chechens, Afghans, Romani, these are getting after 2010 worse. Vietnamese better, Ukrainians better until 2016-17, and now they are getting worse. The last pulse. My focus was on public posts, public comments. This is about the ethics, you know. I'm not searching through the friends, Facebook comments, etc. Only what is on public, publicly available information, because I look at the public accounts of people, but what is public, you know? Because I was not only interested about what they are writing, but who are they? And I collected data from 1 to 3 manually, aggregated, summarized, presented in the form strictly anonymous, you know, so that's ongoing. Even if there are some comments which could be useful, they knew that these comments were actually written publicly, so I'm not making fun of somebody, even if I could. And there are many reasons, believe me. So there are 2 dimensions of my interests. Comments under the Facebook post in 2022. For the criteria, I was inspired by the concept of Ministry of Interior and later approved by Czech governments, which were updated. There were such a drafts, and they came up to 16 or so items, which were important to be followed for successful integration. So I looked at the Pilsen, at integration policies, at 4 integration policies. I looked at posts which are related to them. or 5 actually, and there were many posts general to internal and external issues. So I use this information too, so you could see. But to be concrete, let me see. Yeah, Facebook accounts of players. So what I write first, second, who are they? These are the criteria. I looked at what do people think on Facebook on this, you know, politically. Actually, I was surprised because doing this research, I found that there are many actually side effect of this research was there are many comments on politics, on Ukrainians in general, how they look, how they drink, you know, how they behave, how rich are their iPhones, you know, etc. And also on Putin, how Putin is good, how, you know, so I put the criteria number 6, other general issues, you know, which as a side effect to 1 to 5, internal, related to Ukrainians here, and external, related to Putin, Ukrainians in Ukraine, how corrupted country it is, etc. And US is bad also, and European Union, etc. So this actually research is based upon this societal cleavage in general, communitarian versus nationalism perspective, or multiculturalist versus nativist, or something like that in general. So as for Facebook players, who are they? What I could search, I could find only few indicators for me: gender, man or woman, estimated age, estimated. I used some online research. If you saw photo, but I use them, and sometimes it's not. You put like into automatic system photo of Donald Trump, and it was like 71. So then it was quite difficult because usually people give them better posts than they are. So I looked at interaction. Sometimes there was a birth, and if not, so I didn't put them. You know, if I was not certain the age estimated, I put such a scales: younger, middle, late middle ages, older, roughly, education, current job, based on information given by Facebook publicly. And I also looked at their own public posts on Facebook accounts, and whether and if so, are they related to politics? Not only, so who are they? And miscellaneous. There are, again, side effects: esoteric people, you know, ethnic identity, some Roma people, you know, you found some Slovaks writing on there, you know, family, you know, many people have families. They are not separated. They actually have families, you know, they go to night shifts. So usually, commonly they are not as rich. There was only one rich person from all 500 I have studied, one which was going to family holidays by planes, and which lives in nice apartment, etc., having great cars. So this is about the social side, quite used, and this is about the general data I found. There were 13 posts I was researching, not randomly, but I went through all the year. There are many posts about whatever, you know, everything. But there are few posts about Ukrainians, and the posts related to my criteria, there were few. So actually, this is who posted, and media link, what it posted. Topic is important, related to my 5 criteria, and you see how many comments there were, you know. So under each of the posts, there were from 7. I had more posts, but when there were only 10 comments, I just left it out, you know. So from 18, I decreased to 13. Negative and positive environment. I'm not anymore busy with positive comments. There were many negative comments from both sides, actually. But like, you are bad, you look with you are fat, and you know, you are too old, and your oculars, that's awful. So I skip this all, you know. So like ad personam arguments are not included here. And some other arguments, people argued about my family, many women with children are worried about Ukrainians, and they are going to have kids, where I put them to schools, etc. If it was directly related, yes. If it wasn't related, I just left them. But sometimes there are bordering cases when I was not certain whether to put it or not. So this is just, you know, both positive and negatives I think it's quite approaching the goal. And negative players, some of people have more negative comments, 5, some only 1, but usually it's rate 1 to 2. Look at the rate, interesting, when beginning of the crisis, 24th of 2, 2022, there were positive and negative comments at the same ratio, like 50-50 almost, Look at the end, there was only exception, but this was whole calm, just like NGOs which are giving close, and they were defending themselves. So the ratio of their posts were much higher than negative comments, which were against giving close to Ukrainian refugees because they are rich enough, or because they put it into garbage anyway. But you see in time that positive comments are decreasing in 2022. I have no explanation why. There could be more explanations. They just gave up to discuss with people with negative comments, or they were just due to continuing financial crisis, high inflation, etc. These people were not convinced as much about helping Ukrainians. I don't know, but there is some sign of that these people are losing in favor of negative comments. Currently, Czech mayor of the Pilsen has own Facebook page, and there are almost only negative comments. And he has not 500. We have 1,000, 300, 1,000. Almost all are negative. And he's playing with fire on this issue. This is the example. You put Facebook page, QAP, website. It's not Krimi Pilsen or other boulevard or securitized. It's just formally, neutrally informing. Pilsen is ready to help Ukrainians. Accommodation, as a first, I found 66 negative comments, and I put all the corpus into a chat, and it said me this. What was there, like in general concerns, there are problems, there are no apartments for them, there are apartments for us. And listen, city is not helping us, but city has money for Ukrainians. In fact, if you read the text, you see that city does not flats to Ukrainians, but it only collects information on them. But usually in these all 13 posts, there was a problem. People never read the text, but these negative comments, they read this and added some emotional issues to that. So accommodation, founding, word counting, most of the comments were on flats, occurrence 40 plus. There are no Pilsen, help, And if you look at phrases, well, now suddenly there are houses, My interpretation from all the corpus related to accommodation, there were no flats for us. I applied for one and waited decades, and I have no flat. They have flat now. Suddenly the city have flats. Suddenly city have flats for them. Look, where are the flats? I live. I had to work all my life. Social allowances or humanitarian aid. Again, big issue. 147 negative comments from 2,000 of all the comments. And again, you can see all the corpus of almost 5,000 words I put into that's not there, I'm lazy because that's my interpretation later. People are discussing helping Ukrainians fleeing the war. Some feel unfair in the government support for them. That was during negative comments, you could see it in the conclusion, government is guilty. Interestingly, government is more guilty than the city or than the region. The region was actually, Pilsen region, most responsible, but the current liberal conservative government was most guilty. That or some persons, prime minister, minister of interior, minister of social and labor, these are guilty people. And social allowances, again, the frequency of words and phrases, you see the government quite high. They have usually all over. They have, we don't have. What about us? That was this win-loss was just in all the criteria. So it was quite interesting how win-loss played role, that they will take jobs, they will take allowances, and we will have taxes increased because of this. Interpretation, win-loss feeling, that is our money. I made this money. I will not, state will not give the money to them. Government is guilty, state is guilty. What about our children? Usually, very commonly, children came to the fore by all these criteria. care about our children. It was not only the women with children, like self-employed women without men separated, but also the family men, etc. What about our children? And it was not only the issue about schooling and enrollment to schools. Single mothers, you know, care about our single mothers. Don't care social allowances to Ukrainians. Of course, there was this general. They have, you saw their meals? They are shopping. They are shopping in shopping malls. They were shopping so much and they put it into garbage. You know, what they got from the people. So they go to work now. They go for social allowances and they will not work. This was job market, because if you want to be integrated, you need to get a job. ChatGPT told me this, and I put 58 negative comments altogether, almost 2,000 words. And you see, well, some of them were worried about jobs. There were 3% of unemployment in Pilsen at the beginning of the crisis, but still, oh, they will take jobs, they will work, I will not work, you know, they will take my jobs, or they will decrease the salaries because they will work for very low salary, you know, or even that there is a law, there was a fake news that there is a law that Ukrainians will have to take 20% more than the Czechs. Somebody wrote a comment and people, yes, Fiala made this law, or Babiš even made this law already, like Prime Minister or Emeritus Prime Minister of the Czech Republic. Ukrainian workers are lazy. They don't work, they work, and I work for them. All of them, I had to repair it, I had to refix it. They work, they are bad workers. Or by many comments, they were, let them go home now. That was almost most frequented sentence. Like, why work? They are winning over Putin already. Look at the news. They want to work here? No. Job market, you see, again, win-lose feeling, they will take our jobs. Suddenly there are jobs available. I want a job in brewery, Pilsner Urquell brewery, and I didn't get it. And suddenly, because that there was the title of the article that job in brewery for Ukrainians, job in hospital in Ukrainians. Ukrainians hospital, I don't go to be health. I will be healed by myself or by alternative doctors only. There were just these comments, but there are many Ukrainians in hospitals already, so it doesn't matter. But they are not going to work because they are lazy. They don't work good anyway, and they might take allowances, but they will not take work. You know, they decrease the salaries of the Czechs. That's what I said. Schooling. Quite important issues that we have no place to go get our children. They will take places for our children first. Second, let them be in separated schools. That was a huge argument. Third argument, they will come, they will go back. Let them go back. So they came permanently, temporary, and they are already winning over Putin. So let them go back. Or COVID learned us how to teach people online. Let them have online, or they will break our children in performance. Don't get them into schools. Schooling, you see phrases, interpretations. That's actually the issue. What I already said. They came for preliminary period, taking places. They shall have their own schools here or be taught online, segregated. By the way, segregation was against the policy of Ministry of Interior, but some cities, including the Pilsens, just coined the policy of segregation of Ukrainian children. I have this article, official article, Pilsen EU strategy, being reasoned by 6 stupid arguments, including that Ukrainian ambassador in Czech Republic wished Ukrainians to be together and they want to go back. So be aware of their illness. Should not forget this, because Ukrainian healthcare is in bad condition. They are not vaccinated, or they are badly vaccinated, and they bring diseases to our schools, to our teachers. Because Ministry of Health said they are fine. They will not have to go through the special screening, and he got high performance here. Válek. Like healthcare, yeah. There was a criticism about health status and integration of Ukrainian refugees, especially in terms of missed health checks. fears about the spread of diseases such as HIV, tuberculosis, and many, many others. You know, this is healthcare is here actually. HIV, actually, I have to say honestly, the article in which collected most comments on healthcare, there was a HIV at the headline, you know, so that's the others like diphtheria, hepatitis, vaccination issues, tuberculosis. It's aggregated from more titles like tuberculosis, TBC, but HIV, that was a title. That is why, but they were arguing, you said Ukrainian women are nice and you want to have Ukrainian women, so you try. Or Fiala, Prime Minister Fiala should sleep with 3 Ukrainian women at least to get HIV. You know, so these arguments they had on this. Yeah, does anybody want to sleep with beautiful Ukrainian women? Oh, sorry for this mischeck. Beautiful. Ukrainian children might not be properly vaccinated. Healthcare in Ukraine is in a good quality. Also, there was a sometimes reason that Ukrainians came here to have free and good healthcare on the expense of our taxation, because healthcare in Ukraine is corrupted and in a bad condition. And they bring AIDS here and HIV. General issues, actually it was most important, interesting. You see the corpus is quite much larger. Us, what about us? You know, bad government. You go home, Ukrainians, shambles. Usually, you know, they are arrogant, shambles, you know, like problematic people, you know, they want to fight only, you know, or they don't want to fight. Sometimes they are conscripts and they should go to fight, or they would fight on the streets, you know, drunken alcohol, arrogant, security issues, not as much, you know. What about us? Ukrainians leave, behavior, and I'm a friend of the streets. And general issues as far as foreigner, many of the Facebook accounts related to these negative comments were tied to disinformation network and to some fake news, and in relation to this. So Putin is good usually, but some of them try to label Putin is bad, Zelensky is also bad, Zelensky is even worse, you know, and they put some fake news related to Zelensky. Donbass, Ukrainians didn't care about Donbass, and that was the reason why Putin came to intervene. That was quite common issue. Government it was related to our government. It is siding too much with NATO and with the West and should side with Putin. History will show civilists, Ukrainian burned civilists in Odessa, was a quite Nazi, Hitler, fascists, you know, that's related to Ukrainians. Just war, Russia is on the side of just war, not follow. Ukraine is not following Minsk agreement. See, Minsk agreement several times, people being convinced that Ukraine is guilty. Committed bad things in Donbass, provoked Russia in Odessa. You could sometimes compare to Nazi fascists in Hitler and Zelensky is like, and West is guilty. Players only one side, because I didn't count it. I still have to recount. I have counted, but not finished yet, because there were like 400 Facebook users, and I'm about recounting 350. So I tried to catch gender, both men and women, but many unidentified or partly identified, roughly 1/3 is not identified. They write nothing about themselves, or there was a man's name, and I found no photos, so I didn't put them as a man. You know, I just left it as unidentified. Which age? You see, most of the people were in their late middle age or older, commenting negatively on Ukrainians. If they were identified by me, level of education and current jobs, I have already mentioned, rarely acknowledged. That's quite interesting. Like all of you, I'm here, I'm Horizon and this and working here, working there. And there was a quiet on Western Front, like nothing. And so many cases, nothing. Or you will not write like as assistant at some shop, you know, but usually I go to night shift. I saw public comment, I go to night shift. So I could put somehow that it's low skilled, low labor, probably. But usually that's my assumption, level of education lower and current job is also lower and lower paid. And that is the reason why they are very afraid of their jobs, of their security issues, of their economic issues. Politics, if they were related to politics the other way, usually no activities related to politics. I would say usually. They just write these comments, but they like their flowers, their children, they go to vacation. Mixed posts related to various issues too, also fine. But there were like 1/4, roughly 1/4, I still have to recount, fragment activism in politics and hyperactivism in politics. Some of these were trolls, bots, anonymous accounts, of course. They put 5 like a day, something against Ukraine, but they were minor. Most of them were identified in general, at least 3/4. Miscellaneous, well, some Roma people. You know, now there is this issue, Roma people and Czech people against Ukrainians, but already in 2022, Roma people with lower societal background and economic background, you could see from the pictures how they live, etc., are complaining about Ukrainians quite a lot. So this like economic social bomb already ticked in 2022. Some Slovaks also. And usually these people were well integrated into society in terms of families. Usually they had families, maybe they were divorced, they had friends, you know, and so that was not the issue that I'm separated and I don't like people, so I don't like Ukrainians. No, the other way. I have family and they will take my wealth. Major findings, I have 10 major findings. I wrote 9 and I will tell you the 10th. Facebook users commonly react on only headline. Reasoning, clarification, context in the text, it's out of their vision. Well, there was a strong resistance against Ukrainian refugees in online public spheres from the very beginning of the crisis. There is such a myth in the Czech media environment that from the very beginning, everybody wanted to help. No, not true. From the very beginning, there were these negative comments, quite strong. At the advent of the crisis, strong camp of cosmopolitan Facebook users, you could see from the table, were arguing strongly against these people with negative comments, but later they were just vanishing. 4th, lose win. Almost in all the criteria under concern, lose win. We will lose, they will win. And it's originated from various concerns about immigration, usually economic, societal, demographic also, or sometimes language. I look, there's in swimming pool, in the streets, in the office, all Ukrainians. I hear only Ukrainian language. 2 prejudices like which are repeated. They are alcoholics, lazy, prostitutes, you know, women, etc. Anti-Ukrainian attitudes related to partial items are frequently accomplished by comments on general issues. That was like that they wrote something like, I don't want to live here, and then they wrote that Zelensky is idiot, you know? And so these sort of things were there. And I jump to number 7, some of Facebook users, in some cases, vulnerable to proclaimed narratives and to fake news media environment, which were posting, and sometimes only some individuals, not Krimi Plzeň or some, just individuals with wrote something. They were defending Shevchik and these people like also COVID to anti-COVID libertarians, anti-COVID measures libertarians also were sympathetic to them. Lower educational economic background, not separated, isolated in terms of family issues. Facebook users, usually strongly in opposition to current Czech government. Prime Minister Fiala, concrete ministers, Válek, Minister of Health, Speaker of the Lower Chamber, Pekarová, or representatives of the Pirate Party, President Pavel, and in some cases against Babiš also, that he coasted too. Usually they are against US, NATO, and the EU. And political affiliation, usually not found. In most cases, I was not able to find anything. In some cases, there were sympathizers of SPD, Tricolora, KSČM, Přísaha, which are such a populist to extremist to weird, like conservative nativist parties, but sometimes mixture of it. You could see that they were just siding with SPD and this Communist Party, you know, they put something from some desolates, you know, and all together. Only one case was from Liberal Stan and rarely Ano. Number 10 is that politicians, which are in charge, didn't use this environment to discuss the problems. Because if I look at the governmental strategy of integration of refugees, any updated, etc., there is this view of majoritarian and minority should reconcile somehow, and the majority should show the way to minorities. And so there was no discommunication at all. They never entered these communications. Only once on official sites there was that Ukrainians were not taking our places at schools. That's fake news, you know, because there were 30 people at schools and 3 more could be from Ukrainians. But first checks enrollment, when it's finished, then it was open for Ukrainians. There was only one at the official website of Pilsen. There was also transition from one government to other government in the Pilsen, and this mayor of the Pilsen is quite populist, going against actually going against the strategy of Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Governments to this. Okay, I think thank you very much for your attention, and longer, so sorry to organizers.
No problem. I assume that the big priority of this workshop is that you don't need to watch, look at your watches continually. Thank you, Przemek. I do not have Facebook. So for me, it is a very interesting insight into the environment I do not know. I'm not familiar with, but I can definitely imagine how horrible it is. So you presented exactly what the reasons why I'm not in Facebook. Indeed, two comments. I would say first, very important, and we know it. Basically, Ukrainians became a new type of Romas. So the majority of assumptions, prejudices, criticism used, and the arguments were used in the, I would say, common language against the Roma population. And this is something that has to be stressed. So this I would say very, very endogenous nature of these issues. The second issue you mentioned, the point 10, that unwritten, and these are the politicians. Now this is the question. If really every type of information has to be used. Now I'm thinking about anonymous letters, for example. Me as a vice rector, should I take into account anonymous letter against any person or not? And I would say this is also the position regarding the, I would say, this alternative scene or fake news media production. And so the third very, very personal comment, the recent Lord of Mayor of Pilsen is an idiot, is a really strange guy, and it's the Lord of Mayor in Pilsen. It's a shame that we do have such mayor in the city. You know it. Indeed, I opened the debate.
Yes, I agree with the third point, what Lada said. Very shortly. Interestingly, first, prejudices, you know. Now, this wave of Ukrainian refugees significantly differs from all previous continuous waves of refugees which was changing. From early 90s, there was a low-paid jobs, working in factories, fields, agriculture, and usually constructions. And regardless of they were university teachers or just workers or semi-workers, you know, semi-skilled workers, but it has changed. And around 2010, they were starting self-employed Ukrainians being self-employed in the Czech Republic due to restrictions in economic crisis, hypothec crisis, 2008. They found easy way to stay here, to be self-employed by many areas, but it has changed. And now 2000, it was actually research, online research, email research conducted by Ministry of Social Work and Social. Yes, thank you, Minister of Labor and Social Issues. Thank you. And they found that they are more educated than the Czechs in general, and most of them are women with their children. Few elderly and very few conscripts which should go. So this is quite different structure. But interestingly, these comments were sometimes, there are many other like details which I had no time to say here, but now I will add this. Sometimes say the Ukrainians which are already here are better than you who came. But I think there was a just demographic concern about so many now. These are here, they work, but you with these ladies, good clothes, you know, usually Czechs wanted probably the refugee not to smell much, you know, but not to have phone, because phone, it must be iPhone, and you have a mobile phone, you are rich, you know, and not to be close, well, because Ukrainians, even if they are poor, they try to be as much as nice as possible, but you are rich and you shop in shopping malls. And second, I wanted to say something, but I forgot it, so it's not important.
I'll give some hard data. No? We do have information that firstly, approximately 1/3 of the Ukrainian refugees already left. No? So we can see it might be return, or they just went to the other country. No? The second issue, the employment rate is quite high. So we assume that approximately 1/3 of the people do have full-time job. And you stayed in Hotel Road, and the ladies that served her were all from Ukraine. The third issue is that in many cases they replaced the foreign workers from Moldova, from Romania. They have this short time agreements, and they just left. This has to be stressed too. But the unemployment rate is extremely low in Czech Republic. We are still about 3%, including the historical regions where the unemployment rate was relatively high. So also in these regions, mostly these people that were unemployed are now under pension. And this older generation, I mean, based on the transformation of industry and so on. So there is no rational reason. So it's an affective polarization issue, definitely in that way. And of course, it will be very interesting to know more about these pro-Russian stances, if they are influenced by really Kremlin propaganda, or these long-term pan-Slavic legacies in the society and so on. I would be very interested. These low-educated people, for example, if they do speak any foreign language. How often they travel, how they communicate with external people, and so on. But Jan.
Thank you for your presentation. So many empirical stuff you presented to us. Thanks a lot. So I will start from the end and from the 10th result, 10th finding, which was about that politicians didn't get in touch with those concerns. And I think it wasn't your point. I think your point wasn't about that they should respond to everything, to every anonymous things. But I think your point was that politicians should take account those citizens' concerns. Am I right? And it was also my idea and of my co-author. So we did online survey experiment with Zuzana Ringlerová at Masaryk University, and we tried to elicit empathy with Czech citizens about humanitarian aid for Ukrainian refugees. And unfortunately, so we tested whether empathy with citizens' concerns might impact the approval of the welfare benefit for Ukrainians. Unfortunately, we got null results. This didn't have any effect on approval of welfare benefit. However, it was one experiment, one statement. If maybe communication would be more frequent, then maybe it would be successful. But there was only one experiment, and we didn't get successful results. Nevertheless, okay. Then from the beginning, I think you mentioned you don't have explanation why positive comments disappeared, and I think I might have explanation. So first of all, do we agree, or do you agree that negative comments are more often and on Facebook? Is it some kind of research like that? Okay, so that people who are on the Facebook, they are more motivated to put negative comments. That's my hypothesis.
Thank you. First question, maybe these politicians, I should maybe add one thing. It's not true that not all politicians entered the online public sphere in these comments. There were some from there was some candidates from SPD, that's extremist parties from Pilsen. For me, it was quite easy to identify birth and age. And then later, there were Facebook users from Přísaha who made self-promo, vote for us, we will resolve it. These extremist parties, some of them were entering these spots, but no other politicians. But to this, I agree with you. I also said I have no explanation which is verified. Only I have some assumption that you discuss, because it was a new. Okay, you don't discuss migration crisis. That's, you get tired of it. But this was new here, invasion, and you see trolls, bots, but regularly people, old people with dogs on the leash, and she's writing with children, you know, grandchildren, and she's writing Zelensky idiot and Putin is great. So then you think, what is, and you probably jump and you write these comments, you defend this true or this liberal true, but I assume maybe they got tired, what I said, or maybe, and it was IDEA, this network, Munich and these people, they tried to put that it was decreasing, the people agreeing with invasion, and that people who are defending Putin are with low social economic background, and which due to inflation and economic crisis as it was on the rise, that maybe less and less people. So I have like these hypotheses, but I have know how to resolve it. I think if I wrote them, they would not respond to me, but my wife, she was concerned about me. Why you this research? They will enter your computer and they will destroy it when they found it, that you did it. So, so I don't know.
So that was my suggestion. That Daniel Munich said that, yeah, the interest in the issue is the main factor why there was decreasing of support. So maybe they will get rid of the issue, and I think that's the explanation so far what we have. Okay, one question. I don't want to be long. Just one question from many others. But what about comments which with mixtured attitudes? Comment with mixture positive and negative. How did you label it? Because that's very important. Whether
how to measure emotions. No?
Not too much time, but again, I actually negative players. There were less negative players than comments because some of them had more comments. I labeled, I indexed all comments, negative comments, into as maximum 3 items related to this. So in general, in corpus, there are more comments, negative comments than this, because some of the comments had actually 3 labels, 3 items, because I have as maximum 3, because in some of the comments, there were 3 issues integrated together. But if, as I mentioned, there were bordering cases. And in some cases, I was really not sure. I remember, I even know the lady, she was positive in all the comments, but they said, HIV positive or HIV negative, it's not good if you don't sleep with them. And she wrote, unless they are prostitutes. You see, and how can I do with it? She wrote so many positive comments and she defended the truth. But in this case, because some other jumped to her, yes, they are prostitutes. So it was for me difficult, and I put there 2 negative comments. Usually, positive and negative comments are to this disinformation and negative propaganda, because they wrote, oh, Putin is bad, but Zelensky is even worse. Look at Odessa burning, etc. So I put this into negative comments, because these were related to this disinformation scene and disinformation network. And actually, Russian propaganda, its strategy is not to win the propaganda war, but to make distrust to all of it. to say there is, like communist, you know, part I remember as I was a child, there is no true in Czechoslovakia, there is no true in Voice of America, nobody has true, don't believe anybody. You know, and these comments I considered as a negative from its essence, from its core, not from statistics to count the words, but Russian propaganda is to make this distrust into any kind of war, trust. So that, but I understand you, the counting words for positive and negative would be difficult.
Thank you. Do we have?
In the 90s, I talk like some grandfather about the war. In the 90s, I was working for the International Organization of Migration. I did a study about the flow of migration. And what we found was that many Ukrainian men go to work in the building industry and others in Czech Republic. And the Czech workers went to Germany. So there was some sort of trail, but they're all men. But so this means Czech society has some experience of Ukrainian people working here, living here. But now the gender is very different. In the 90s and 20s, it was men working in the building industry or in farming. Now female are coming, but they should have experience how Ukrainians are. But they should have some cultural. It's not that suddenly somebody from Mongolia is coming. There must be some historical collective memory of these previous workers. I'm just wondering about this.
Well, I have no scientific proof for it. From my environment, from my extended friends, many of them became rich because of this, what you explained in 90s. 1 German mark, 18 crowns, 2,000 crowns salary, you changed it and you had 10 times more and you worked 10 years there. But all of these people are against Ukrainians coming here. You know why? Because we are the West, we are part of the West, but they are arrogant, they are alcoholics, you know, Zelensky drug user and, you know, corrupted country, we are different. So I would wish it helped. I maybe close my presentation with Umberto Eco saying not only students and teachers, but also workers should have Erasmus stay everywhere.
I completely agree. I do have neighbor from Ukraine, and if I sit in the pub in Tluchna, then I get the reflection, this vox populi, and I would say that what Frank said is excellent and punctual. I would say this is also the issue that these people you spoke about, the Czech workers that get rich, they project their own characteristics into Ukrainians. They are drinking, they are gambling and so on, but they project that the Ukrainians do it, or the Roma population do it. So it's projection, and it's not about gender, I would say. It's not about gender, but we know it. This hate speech, ukáčko, the person from Ukraine. My mother-in-law, I don't like her, but she is I would say a normal average Czech lady. She was working in the hospital as a nurse, and the cleaning works, they are for Ukrainians. So I would say this is this very typical Czech prejudice, and the same was with Vietnamese populations. I would say in many ways. Now the situation is different because there is a new actor. It's Kremlin, but I would say the main characteristics remain in that way.
So joking a little bit, you said, okay, it used to be the Roma population that was criticized, prejudiced. Nowadays, its place has been taken by the Ukrainians. I was talking with some Italians a couple of months ago, and they said, you know, nowadays it's whatever people from Northern Africa. So we stopped fighting within us, Southern Italians versus Northern Italians. Now we're fighting. So in a way, it's a good thing that we as a species are able to only fight against one enemy at a time, because just like a joke, that would be the advantage.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Przemek. We are out of time, basically, and I do have one good information for you. I promised to prepare my own presentation, but I was not able to do it. This week, I already had 3 other presentations. I just didn't have time. I hope you don't mind. Indeed, in that way, I propose to give the floor specifically to Christian. If you would like to make some final comment, it would be very, very helpful.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ladislav. Thank you very much, everybody who presented here, and also to the online participants. I think we have this new project on the state of democracy in Europe, and this gives us the chance to talk about other things also. And so we have some sort of monthly sure fix to talk about it. Plus, we want to plan live after the project with the Observatory on Trust. So I think it's a good forum for scholars, I would say 4G, very young, PhD, postdoc, medium, and the oldest category to work together and to meet in different places. And I would like to thank Ladislav and his team for the wonderful preparation of this workshop. It was very interesting, and I got information well above and beyond my expectation. So it was really worthwhile. And I thank your university again, and I thank you all for coming. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day in golden Prague. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. I really hope, specifically those who stay 1 week now in Prague, that you have enjoyed an excellent late summer weather. It's hot, but it's really much better than some chilly, rainy weather. Safe trip home also in that way. And thanks also to the online colleagues who joined us. And I believe that we will meet on a similar occasion soon in that way. Thank you again, and have a nice weekend.